Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Chemical Biological Wearables Innovation Workshop. My name is Jeremy Knopp from Armatus, and I'm going to kick this off with Dr. Kristen O'Connor for her opening remarks, and then I'll return and introduce myself and Armatus. And thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And I'd invite the folks in the back, if you feel so inclined, come closer if you'd like. We won't bite, I swear.
The 12 of us can sit at one table.
We can be intimate today. Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Kristen O'Connor. I work in the office of the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Chemical and Biological Wearables. I'm really excited to be here today with you all. And also my colleagues from the Chem Bio Defense Program. So I am the Physical Research Development Acquisition Director in the Chem Bio Defense office. What that basically means is I have oversight over all of the resources and the capability development of things that are not overseen by the FDA. So I have oversight over all of the sensing systems, the analytical tools, boots, suits, gloves, decontamination equipment. So it's quite a large portfolio. So we're really looking forward to giving you a little overview today of the Chem Bio Defense Program in our office, and also our enterprise, and as a scene setter for how you can do business with us. But also to let you know what some of our priorities are, and specifically on wearable sensors, which is why you're here today. So this is an overview of the Chem Bio Defense Program. You may be wondering a little bit about what our purpose is. So the Chem Bio Defense Program is purpose to develop and deliver capabilities for the Joint Force so that we can fight and win in Chem Bio contested environments. Congress created the Chem Bio Defense Program to develop these capabilities holistically to support the Joint Force. Prior to the Chem Bio Defense Program's development, each of the individual services, like the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, were charged with having to develop their own capabilities independently. So the Chem Bio Defense Program helps become a union and synergize across all those services, and so that we can actually fight as a joint force with the same equipment. We receive our requirements directly from the services. That helps inform where we need to do capability development. And then the Chem Bio Defense Program as an enterprise resources against those requirements to be able to fund that earliest basic research all the way through advanced development and procurement of the capabilities. We then hand off those capabilities to the services to train, equip, and be able to get into the fight. So as the slide says, we do have about an annual budget of $1.7 billion to be able to support our mission. And by no means do we do this as a single office in the Pentagon. We are an enterprise composed of all of these partners as listed on this slide. It's not intended for you to be able to read all of them, but just know that it is very much a team sport. So I want to give you just a flavor of who makes up the Chem Bio Defense Program enterprise when we talk about the enterprise. So we in the ODASD office work on behalf of our senior leaders in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. It's an oversight body to be able to resource the capability development appropriately to meet the needs of the services, but also to meet the strategic intent at a national and military level as laid out by our OSD senior leaders. Then on the bottom, I do want to highlight some of our key partners that we have in the room as well, and you're going to hear from today. We have folks from the Joint Science Technology Office for Chem Bio Defense, or JSTO as we refer to it. You'll hear from Mr. Ed Argenta today about the S&T work specifically on wearables. And then we have our Advanced Development Office, and this is the Joint Program Executive Office for Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear Defense. That is called the JPO, CBRND, and you'll hear from Mr. Dan McCormick from the JPO today about the advanced development activities that they're specifically doing with wearables and support. So I wanted to highlight where do wearables fit when we think about why it's so important to us in the bigger picture to be able to support the Joint Force for early warning capabilities. We have a strategic priority called integrated early warning. Ooh, that is very sensitive. Sorry. So when we think about integrated early warning, this is to be able to give commanders the decision support space, so be able to have as much information as soon as possible to be able to make some decisions. This allows us to be able to do this, we need to be able to have sensors and analytical systems and then be able to make sense of that information in order for those commanders and decision makers to act. So when we think about sensing, many of you are familiar with the rapid pace of technology convergence and how our threat space, whether that's from a chem or a bio side, is rapidly expanding. And so it makes our job to be able to protect the Joint Force even more difficult as the number of threats expand. And so when we think about what sensors do we need to develop, it is really an integrated approach. It's no longer are we thinking about one sensor to develop or to detect one particular threat. We really have to be able to be more agile and more adaptable. And so just wanted to highlight, and I'll focus because we're talking wearables today, which is very heavy on early warning of a biological indication, which could still very much be for a chemical indication if you've been hit with a chem threat or you're getting off your baseline. But I'll focus a little bit on the bio side because we're really thinking a lot about biosurveillance and early warning of bio threats. We had last year the Biodefense Posture Review was released by the department. And it's a strategic document very focused on early warning of emerging and enhanced biothreats. And so when we think on the bio side, we need to be able to have those sensing systems that can be able to detect natural, accidental, and deliberate biothreats. And so this is definitely a hard challenge, and it's going to take quite a bit of different sensing systems that are layered and integrated. So when we think about sensors like wastewater surveillance and these wearable or physiological monitoring systems, these are more passive sensors. And that's something that will allow us to be able, in the competition phase, so before you get into crisis and conflict, to be able to just sense what's going on in my community, how's the health of my force, what are people's baselines, and then you start being able to get that ground truth information, and then when you see interesting things happen, that's when you go, what's going on in my world? And so it's those passive sensing systems, like wastewater and wearables and others, that allow us to be able to have a really good understanding of kind of steady state, and then to be able to have tips and cues about when we might be moving, given a geopolitical situation or a military situation, we might be moving into the next phase of competition. And that's where we bring in more of those active sensing systems that maybe the Joint Force has on them as part of their kit. And so critically, wearables are definitely going to be kind of a constant sensing capability that supports the Joint Force throughout competition, through crisis and conflict phases. So one of the things when we think about developing sensors, they really have to fit the concepts of employment and the concepts of operation for the joint force. I mean, I have a science and technology background and I can think really big creative thoughts, but if it doesn't fit how a service member will operate, either today and or into the fight of the future, it serves no purpose and it's just gonna sit on the shelf. So everything that we do is very much informed by the service concepts and also thinking about where are they fighting. So are these ground-based forces and sensing systems, land, air, space assets? So very much that's part of that layered integrated early warning approach, is not only layered in time, but also in space to be able to support the services. There's other things that we have to consider when we're developing capabilities, is about the communications environments that we're in. So we just saw that, sometimes our internet comes and goes. Well, a lot of the military fights in communication contested environments. So when we're developing sensing systems, we might not always be connected to a network, or we might have to create our own local networks. We might also have to think of the security of the communication that's being transmitted. So all of these things are adding complexity to our sensor development, but it's something that we have to critically take into account when we're doing S&T, but also the advanced development of capabilities. The other part of that is to be able to make sense of that information and to act on it, you have to move the data. You have to, or at least move some of that decision support capability. And so we think about data compression or that data transfer, which is very important. So it's not just about what data is on the widget, it's how do you move that data or information for somebody to be able to act on it. So I want to talk about tying into sort of making sense and having actionable information. One of the things you might have heard about is a communications architecture that the joint services are moving towards in the future. It's called JADC2. This is called the Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control System. This is something that we are not developing, we are going to be integrating into. This is a joint service activity. So we want to make sure that our sensors and the data and decision support tools can play in the CJADC2 environment. So it's something that our advanced developers and then the S&T is feeding capability up to advanced development that will be able to play in that CJADC2 command and control environment to make sure that we are developing in parallel and at the pace of the joint services to make sure that we can integrate into those operating environments. Once we have that information, the earliest that we can get it and be able to make decisions, it allows us to not only have the commanders be able to say, maybe I'm going to avoid a certain environment, I'm going to move my forces and maneuver a different way around the threat, or I'm going to take a different protective posture, but it also allows us to be able to say, maybe we need to be developing some medical countermeasures against a biothreat, for example, that we have not seen before. And so as soon as we can get that information and characterize the threat, it feeds back into that medical countermeasure development. And we have programs that are working to be able to do rapid medical countermeasure development and moving away from that one bug, one drug paradigm to be more agile. So you'll hear from Ed and Dan after me. These are the very, very smart folks that are actually developing capabilities. They're the thought leaders in our community along with their colleagues. So you're going to hear a lot more detail about how our wearable physiological monitoring systems for chem bio threats is fitting into this integrated early warning paradigm. So I hope that this gave you a little bit of a sense of who we are in OSD and the Chem Biodefense Program Enterprise. You'll get a lot more details from Ed and Dan, like I mentioned. And I do want to give a plug for a bit, and we can pop this up maybe at the end so you can grab these QR codes or come take a picture of my notes. But this is how you can work with us. And we can talk about this in a lot more detail in the discussion. But we have different opportunities, and these are kind of front ends, especially for the JET. The Joint Enterprise Technology Tool, this is a way that it's your avenue to be able to talk to folks in the CBDP. And we can connect you to subject matter experts, program managers, if you've got ideas of how you can best support the Chem Biodefense Program. And we can pair you up and talk about solicitation opportunities or be able to brainstorm how you might be able to fit into our enterprise and help us. Similarly, the CWMD Consortium is an industry consortium that allows you to partner with the government to be able to go after competitive awards for programs that we're running. This uses the other transaction authority that the government has, which really helps us avoid that valley of death from having to recompete contracts from science and technology to advanced development. The OTA, or other transaction authority, allows us to keep contracts open to cross from S&T to advanced development. Gives us more agility in the contracting process. Hopefully it's also easier for the companies to be able to work with the government, but the CWMD Consortium is something that we in the CBDP are using specifically to support us. And there's also a couple other consortiums that we can leverage as well. And lastly, I just wanted to put a plug in for our Chem Biodefense S&T conference. It's in Fort Lauderdale at the beginning of December of this year. So if you hadn't been aware of that, I think registration is still open. Yep, Ed's shaking his head, yes. So we would welcome you there. It is a wonderful, wonderful conference to talk to the S&T folks, other industry partners. You've got international partners as well that come. So highly, highly recommend that you be able to join us for that. So with that, I will probably turn it over. We can maybe take a couple quick questions. I don't know if we want to, or I'll turn it over to
I'll come back.
yeah, I'll turn it back over to Jeremy.
Questions?
I have a quick question. Is it okay if we take pictures of your slides?
Yeah, that's fine. They're in class.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Back a few slides, you mentioned a strategic document. Can you provide something that would allow me to find that, or is that not publicly accessible?
So we are revamping our Chem Biodefense strategy that should be released. I can't put an exact timeline on it, pretty imminently, and that will be able to be shared. There is the Biodefense Posture Review. You can Google that. It was quite widely released, and there's a lot of actually really interesting, so our senior leaders in OSD did a lot of public engagement to be able to roll that product out, but I'd be happy to provide information as well.
Thank you.
Perfect.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. O'Connor. So my name's Jeremy Knopp. I'm not a chemist and I'm not a biologist, but I did work for the Air Force Research Laboratory for 25 years, and I was brought in by a biologist, as a matter of fact. Dr. Morley Stone was my first government supervisor as a GS4. And so that was when AFRL back in the late 90s was starting up their biotechnology program. And so I did work on a few things involving biosensors with Morley. And so since then, I worked also for the Air Force Office of Scientific Research at their Tokyo office for 7 years, and then I've remained in Japan ever since. And now I'm the CTO for Armatus. It's a company that is facilitating dual-use technologies from foreign allies and partners to enter the DoD ecosystem. And we also assist U.S. companies with also entering the Japan and Australia defense markets. I'm also accompanied here with our Chief Operating Officer, Frank Clark, who's the attaché for the Army at the U.S. Embassy twice in Tokyo, so he's joining us today. So I'm just welcoming you to this session to go over kind of a procurement timeline where we're going to highlight a new pipeline of activities, and that follows the February acquisition hackathon or design sprint, if you will. These are directly linked to RFIs that will be released after TechNet to attendees here. So make sure you swipe your badge so you can get your information, keep you informed of these opportunities, which they come quickly, and the deadlines happen really quickly. So please make sure you scan your badge. So in the next acquisition hackathon or design sprint is actually going to be here in Honolulu again in February. It's in partnership with PICHTR, and I'll introduce PICHTR here in a minute. It's the Pacific International Center for High Technology Research. And PICHTR is led by Ian Kitajima, who's sitting here in the front. And he's going to speak about this pipeline. Armatus, by the way, is a U.S. veteran-owned and operated non-traditional company registered to do business in Japan and Australia. And one of the things we do is vet the technology from our foreign allies and partners. And so we just heard from Dr. O'Connor about a new opportunity involving OTAs, and we have Terry Tay in the audience somewhere. I don't think he's here. He'll probably step back in the room any minute now. But for more information, you'll have an opportunity to speak directly with him. And we have some flyers for the new OTA opportunities here. I have some with me, and Ian does as well. So with that, once again, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Ian Kitajima to talk about PICHTR. Thank you.
Good morning and aloha. Thanks for being here. Hope you're enjoying your time here in Hawaii. Thanks, Jeremy. I just want to tell you a little bit about this acquisition sprint that's going to be coming up next year to kind of follow on TechNet. And we're really looking forward to collaborating with a bunch of folks here. So my name is Ian Kitajima. I'm with an organization called PICHTR. We say PICHTR, but it's the Pacific International Center for High Technology Research. It's been around for almost 40 years. It was started to facilitate and develop relationships between the United States government and the Japanese government 40 years ago. So it was actually started with a handshake between President Reagan and Prime Minister Nakasone at the time, as well as a senator from the state of Hawaii. And so that kind of started this relationship, and it continues on. And so our work has primarily been building those relationships through technology collaborations, and one of which is actually an international dual-use program, incubation programs that we're running for the Japanese government. So part of this Apex OTA that I'm going to speak about a little bit is related to that. Okay, so in this event that's coming up in February, we were asked, well, when we met with Indo-PACOM J6 and FCA, the guidance was to look at data sharing. It's always been a big challenge, right? It's like we set things up, we do it, and then after exercise, everything goes away, and there's no data sharing. And so it's really to find a way to engage industry and users, US, allied nations, and procurement firms. And while we can't do this at this event, that's kind of what's going to happen is we're going to issue some RFIs for companies to respond to that allow our agencies here to kind of down select and have companies provide capabilities for an operational vignette that we're going to be hosting in February at this PAC conference. And so that was those little business cards that you picked up. So this will be our second annual PAC conference. And PAC stands for, it's basically our Partnership in Climate Tech Conference. And I know it sounds kind of weird, like what? It's a climate tech conference. But what's really nice about it is it's a very small conference. It's only going to be limited to about 200 people. So the first time we did it, everybody loved the fact that it's so like everybody would just fit this room. So you would meet everybody. And what we've been trying to do with that conference from the beginning is to design it so you would meet people you don't see, you never met before, but it's important for you maybe to meet them because they're outside of your realm. So it's kind of like, I tell people, it's like the bar scene in Star Wars. You got all these weird characters, but they're interesting, weird characters for you to meet. And so it's an opportunity for to see that, but it's also opportunities for agencies to see maybe some new disruptive capabilities that may affect your requirements. And so we're going to send this information out, the RFIs, the February event. So that's why we were kind of forcing you to scan your badges. Okay, now, in summary, the Apex OTA, which is managed by Tech Accelerator, and you see Terry back there, is supported by PICHTR and other organization members. But our aim is to accelerate, of course, acquisition of innovation technologies from US and US allied nations. So PICHTR's specific role in this is on the allied nation side. So our role is to source and find really disruptive, innovative companies and technologies from allied nations. And so our role is the recruitment, management of the allied nation companies, overseeing research prototype projects, and also ensuring compliance with US government requirements. So again, so this initiative was basically started from our side from 2019. So we were asked way back when by OUSD, R&D, Trusted Microelectronics, to engage with Japanese companies back in 2019, which was a struggle. But it showed the capabilities of what was available in allied nations that could really help us in the US in our work. So very recently, just this week, PICHTR has been named the lead for the allied nation portion for this Apex OTA. So that's what those flyers are there too, so please grab one. The OTA is kind of interesting because it's so broad. It goes from R&D all the way to production. And that was kind of unique, and it's super broad. So it has biochem, and I know you have your own OTA, so this one is kind of interesting because it's so broad, but it also goes from the R&D all the way to the production side. So anyway, so we really look forward to facilitating these conversations. Hope you'll see you here again in Hawaii for a very unique opportunity to work all together. And the focus of, again, that conference was, most conferences, unfortunately, we have this great time, we get together, and then we all go back to our work, right? Because we're so busy. So part of that is how do we keep building those relationships and those unique, high-value kind of relationships that can continue on. And so we'll be actively kind of managing that and helping to grow that. And then I'm going to show you, okay, so this is the conference next year, the PAC conference. And then we're also working with Armatus on this as well. So this is next year. So this QR code will take you to the PICHTR website to describe what that conference is about. And if you can sign up and come join us, as well as that bit.ly. So sign that QR code or grab that business card that we have on the back. And then, what if we're going to show this now? Jeremy, you want to show this now for folks?
I don't think it's this.
Okay. We're eventually going to have some sign-ups for folks if they want to meet with some of the panelists here later today. So anyway, thank you very much, and we'll see you guys here in Honolulu again. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Ian. And Ian's going to be with us for the duration the whole day. So if you have any questions about PICHTR or the event coming up, please stop by and talk to him, and of course talk to me as well if you have any questions. But we'll go ahead and get right to it. Next speaker is Dan McCormick.
It's gonna be.
Oh, great. See if I can bring up each slides.
Welcome everyone. My name is Edward Argenta. As Dr. O'Connor mentioned, I am part of the Joint Science Technology Office, so I'm a Science and Technology Manager, just one of many within the organization, focused on the wearable technology area. So this presentation is going to go over the kind of the history of the portfolio. We started this effort in about 2016. Is when we thought of the idea of how we can leverage wearable technology to identify chemical and biological insults to our warfighters. And you'll see a progression of how the science has evolved, how we leveraged it for the COVID-19 response activities, and where we're going to in the future to expand the capability out. And then it'll be followed up with by Mr. McCormick to talk about the pilot effort that we did as well. All right, so what has Midnight been preparing for? So as Dr. O'Connor mentioned, our threats are ever expanding. So whether they're novel threats being genetically modified or synthetically developed, or nature running its course, new threats are coming at us on a day-to-day basis. And we can no longer be prepared for a single capability to answer a single threat. So how can we leverage new technologies like wearable technology to inform and identify a potential threat that's impacting our warfighters and the general population as well? So, this slide was, again, in about 2016 was when the portfolio kicked off, and, how do we prepare for something that we don't have an immunological response? We don't have medical diagnostic capabilities for, we don't have environmental detection. And you can read the whole list. And if that sounds familiar, that was the position we were in when COVID-19 came about. So this technology and focus area has been about a threat agnostic approach to human-focused digital detection. My catchphrase is, I don't want to prick or stick you. So how do I collect information outside the body, whether it's through wearable technologies, maybe some minimally invasive, but really the focus of this whole presentation will be how I can do it without having to break the skin barrier at all. And we have some exciting results that I look forward to presenting to. Okay, so bigger picture, just high up, I'm part of the Information Sciences branch of the Chem Defense S&T area. So our division is focused on analytical capabilities, and the catchphrase for us is making decisions easier. So how do we make those hard decisions easy through the advancement of analytical capability? My portfolio area sits in that branch and is again focused on those threat agnostic approaches to identifying a hazard. And then how do we do a bit more with that? So detecting a hazard and detecting someone is unwell is great, but can we predict recovery? Can we predict how severe someone might be? Can we predict when they're going to be mission ready again? So that the commanding officers can make decisions about their unit taskings in the future. So leveraging some of this data, how can we get back to normal? And can we do this in a way that doesn't require someone to wear something? So investments in standoff technology where we could get some of these physiological markers remotely without having someone to wear something. So some interesting areas. Okay, so you may have seen this before. If not, the way we do business, whether it's in the warfighter area or even general healthcare, is we wait for symptoms to show up. We go to the doctor does differential diagnosis, they may run a whole host of tests, and then they give you therapeutics or say it's viral and you need to just go on your way and hope for the best. How can we do that better? So if we can get advanced of those symptomologies and identify that your body is having a natural immune response, earlier on than the symptoms appear, then we can start advancing the diagnostic capabilities and using those earlier. We can get therapeutics into you, and hopefully reducing the overall impact to the combat readiness for the warfighter or general health of the general population overall. So that is the goal of this effort, and the goal of the portfolio was to get to those advanced capabilities and those advanced therapeutics and diagnostic capabilities sooner and faster so that we can treat and be mission ready. So just kind of covered this a little bit, and Dr. O'Connor mentioned this as well. We have amazing diagnostic assays that are truly capable, world-class, within our military framework, within the whole healthcare complex. But they're very specific and they're very sensitive, which is great. That's a pro, but it also means they're only good for one thing. They aren't diverse enough to understand some of those ailments that we don't know about yet. They're also invasive at times, right? They have to take a blood draw. They have to go do sampling. You have to send it out for lab results, right? It's not immediate. From the Midnight approach, it's how can we leverage the host response and identify those small features that might be in a signal that I'll go over in a minute to identify that someone is maybe potentially coming unwell. It's persistent surveillance, so Dr. O'Connor mentioned that term as well. So this is something that we can deploy. The kit is about $1,000, and after that you're wearing it forever. And think about it as you're continuously getting testing. As the algorithm is running, you're always getting tested to see if you're becoming unwell. So if you think of the value proposition or the return on investment there, the cost of a diagnostic may be $10 or $100 a test. For $1,000, you have a test running on you every day, multiple times a day potentially, for $1,000. So after 2 days, you've got your return on investment already in the kit that you're executing with. Some of the things, just to be here is the specificity of it is still something that we need to work on, and you're going to hear a little bit about how we work with some of the data we've collected, but getting a broader set of illnesses and chemical exposures is a challenge, right? Ethically, we can't expose people to some of the threats that we're concerned with in the Chem Biodefense program, or almost all the threats we're concerned with. So we have some novel ideas that you're going to hear about at the end of this presentation of how we could potentially use other systems, whether computational or other cell line systems, to inform some of the threats that we're really concerned with. So just to level set, if you're not an expert in this field, and I'm certainly not, I'm a meteorologist and not even a chemical or biologist here, but these are the waveforms that we're looking at leveraging. And you're going to hear bits and pieces of how we've used different features from these. So photoplethysmography is what's on the back of a watch. So if you're wearing a smartwatch right now, a Garmin, an Apple, a Samsung, name your Fitbit device. It's using PPG to monitor your heart rate, your respiration rate. There's ballistocardiography, which we did a little bit of work on, which is a sensor that would lay on top of a bed, and it measures the pulse of your heart and your respiration rate. A really interesting application for, if you think of a Navy setting for us, if you were to instrument all the cots, then you get data without having to put a wearable device potentially on them. Some of that technology has been bought out by bigger industry partners and has been taken off the market, but we did find some interesting results from it. And then electrocardiography, so ECGs, which you're all familiar with, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail in each of these. So a closer look at this, and I promise I'll summarize this in a nice way in a minute, but PPG waveforms have a peak. It uses a light diode that's going through your skin, and it has a pulse, and it comes down, and a pulse, and it comes down. The width between those two pulses is your heart rate, and then all the other features that are in there. For the BCG waveform, it's very similar. It's starting to see a little bit more features from some of the activity within your heart, the pressures that are exhibited on the bed system that you're in the monitor. So it has a little more unique feature in it. And then the ECG waveform, which many of you probably are familiar with if you've gone to a doctor before and you've gotten a chest, set up or your heart rate collected. It has a lot of really unique features here. The QRT complex. You can derive a lot of unique data from this waveform. And that's what's great and exciting about all these data that we're collecting is, if we look at this chart, it's overlaid for a single patient, it looks like a lot of noise. But to artificial intelligence and machine learning, there's a wealth of information here that can be gleaned from, learned from, and there's insight in that data that we may not be able to see even as a human, right? So as we think about clinicians, they do an amazing job of analyzing these features and these data, but the computer can get to the nuances, and when it co-locates with other data feeds, it can really bring more powerful insights into our algorithms and get performance in an automated fashion, which is exciting and why we pursued this area. So I kind of covered the utility. So I think there's a lot of utility on both sides of the industry. And warfighter, I think you'll see the demonstration of what we've done over the last 8 years in this space. But I really do look forward to the time and day that we all have a wearable technology that has this automated illness detection on our watch, and you can stay home and isolate yourself, and we prevent the next pandemic. That's the holistic big vision that I would see and love to happen. So I'm going to step into the portfolio a bit and kind of talk through how we progress. So where we started with the animal models, and then go into all the other kind of the pathway to success, and then demonstrate the demonstrated successes that we've had. So the first is in the animal modeling. So early in 2015 or so, 2014, we did some non-human primate exposures to some of our threats with embedded telemetry. So they had implants that were measuring these similar waveforms, or what I just discussed, and they were able to identify through a machine learning algorithm that they were exposed to an agent, whether it was a biological or a chemical agent. They were also able to demonstrate that an algorithm that was trained on one agent was performant against another agent, which is powerful. So if we can expose, if we can collect data and train on one type of illness or one type of chemical, it may have power to do a broader class. This was really the stepping stone for us to say if the non-human primate was the first good example of a success, and it's like, what can we do in the human side now? This was the foundational work that led us to where we get to the human. So we initially just started with, what does human data even look like? What does a normal day look like? What does a hard day look like for a warfighter? So this activity or this project used commercial off-the-shelf devices, and I forgot to highlight that, but we're leveraging commercial off-the-shelf devices for all these portfolio areas. We think industry is excelling in this space. The DoD doesn't need to make significant investments in this, but we need to leverage it, and we need to be able to use the same endpoints that many other people within the DoD are using as well. So, we're one small niche within, the bigger, broader DoD, but there's a lot of investments in leveraging wearables for readiness, for fatigue monitoring, you name it, physical fitness testing. So if we're all using a common device or a common endpoint, then we can integrate our technologies into their solution stacks much easier. So for this effort, we asked individuals, warfighters, and also civilians to go hike the Grand Canyon. So if you're not familiar with Grand Canyon in the United States, it's a rugged hike. If you go rim to rim, it's 22 miles, 10,000 feet of elevation change. It's a reverse hike, so most of the time you do a hike, you hike up and hike down. You hike down and hike up, right? So you're a little tired from the down and you have to get up. There's also significant temperature changes. You start at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius, and at the bottom of the Grand Canyon you get to 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. And that's over just a simple 3-hour or 4-hour change. But it's the gaining of the elevation loss. So this was really just understanding what a hard day looked like, but also able to identify through grouping of units that which people were leading and lagging, which was interesting to us. we could identify the individuals that were struggling to do the hike and those that were excelling at it. So if you think from a mission perspective, you could potentially balance load, you could, give it a little rest, or you could, who might be struggling on a day-to-day basis through this effort. So really interesting understanding of just baseline of what a day looks like. Not really focused on the chem side yet, but what does a normal hard day look like? Because we don't want false alarms to that. We can't have an algorithm that's alerting to, a hard day, a hard rock. That's useless. They're going to turn it off if it says, oh, you just hiked 18 miles with a 60-pound pack, and you look, fatigued and you look ill. Well, no, that's a normal day, right? So we need to be sensitive to the algorithm. So then we looked at understanding sleep, and this was some of the work that we did with the BCG platform with the Navy cohort. They were looking at, can they identify sleep time? So there's some signal to noise issues that we need to deal with, right? When we're wearing wearable technology and devices and you're active, sometimes the data is poor. So what's the best time to look at data is potentially when you're at rest. So can we automatically identify those sleep periods so that we can then carve out that data to do feature analysis and then predictive analysis on? So this effort was focused on that. This was, again, before all the new cool COTS technology that already does that automatically now, right? Like watches and rings are doing that, now for you, but this was ahead of that time. And then we moved into some CB agent proxy studies. So this is where we start getting into threats of concern and seeing if there's something there for our program. So the first thing was LPS, which is a protein that we expose people to ethically, all under Human Subject Research Board reviews, all voluntary consenting to this. But LPS is an immune response, an inflammation response that you get from a biological insult. It's something that happens in your body. And we were trying to purposely dose people with LPS to see if we can find the signature for the people that got exposed. So it was a double-blinded study. One time they came in with an LPS dose, the other time they were given a placebo. And we had some successes with it. We did learn some lessons on the performance of some of these types of technologies with it. But didn't come up with an algorithm necessarily for it, but you could see in the plots that we do see that there's percent changes when the LPS was given versus when the placebo was given in this case. So it was an indication that there is something there, but just not enough, not big enough data to do any machine learning with or anything like that. It was more of a small scale study. At Fort Leonard Wood, that's our location for the Chemical and Biological Schoolhouse. We put people through a tear gas chamber every time they go through. It's for them to understand the performance of their PPE, to get comfortable in the PPE. So they go in with their personal protective equipment on. They're told to demask and get an exposure to tear gas, and then they put it back on, and it's an experience. I was out there for it. I experienced it. So what we were trying to do is biological. We have a lot of advantage in the biological side. It takes time for your body to respond to a biological insult. So if you get exposed to something biologically, it might take 2 days or 3 days to show symptomology, right? From a chemical agent, it's almost instantaneous. So can the algorithms and the data coming off these devices be performant enough and quick enough to identify someone's exposed to chem? Right now, if people are in PPE, we're asking them, are you okay? We're doing checks on them. But how do we know that if something got through the mask? And there's a lot of heat issues as well that I think that Mr. McCormick might cover as well when they're in PPE. So this was, you're going to see rock curves, or I'm going to talk about area under the rock curve. It's a performance curve of false alarm versus true positive rates. If you think of anything over 0.8 is clinically relevant. So if we watch the next charts and you see in this chart, we're above 0.8, which would be a clinical relevant capability. So and a clinician might be able to trust that level of capability. So in this small scale study with 36 subjects, we did have the ability to detect when they were exposed to CS and not, both in the chamber, and we also did an outdoor exposure too. They were doing a rush or a walk, and they had an exposure to CS, and they had to mask up immediately. So then we wanted to go bigger. So I talked, the last 3 slides were very much small scale studies, again, small investments to see if something was there. And this is how a portfolio kind of progresses. You show initial idea, then you demonstrate, like in a small scale study, that there might be something more there to invest in. And this is where we took the next level up and we make a bigger investment with, let's see if there really is something there. So what we did was we partnered with the Defense Innovation Unit. They have a booth downstairs, but we worked with a healthcare company, Philips Healthcare, out of North America. And they had access to their entire hospital data set. They had over 8 million patient records that they could analyze. And what we tasked them to do was identify hospital-acquired infections. So people that were coming into the hospital for a routine surgery, or were not ill, but were maybe getting a surgery 2 days or a procedure. But then they became, they acquired a hospital-acquired infection or the potential of a hospital-acquired infection. So what Philips Healthcare was able to do was able to take the data that they had access to and train it on the subset and identify hospital-acquired infections and the potential that someone might be affected and show the performance of that. So if we look at here, we defined the cohort through a selection process of if the ICD-9 code, so that's the clinical diagnostic code, had a hospital-acquired infection. Or was a microbiological lab ordered? Or was there a note in the clinician's notes for the medical record? So what we wanted to do is needed to access the data before the hospital-acquired infection. We needed to find people that they didn't come in and they didn't come in ill because they got ill when they were at the hospital-acquired infection. So then we know that the data that we've collected previous to that time point or that clinical suspicion is data that we might be able to train an algorithm against to produce a capability to say that they were potentially infected. And then we had a control cohort that matched, to limit biasing of it. Obviously, the control cohort was much bigger because not a lot of people get hospital-acquired infections, which is great. We don't want those. So this is the performance of the hospital-acquired infection model or capability. So there was 36,000 hospital-acquired infections in this study with 256,000 controls. Our performance, again, was 0.8. And if you look here, we did 2 studies. We did labs and vitals, and we did vitals only. And I should mention, too, that this is full vitals. This is the hospital-grade data. Everything, ECG, respiratory rate, like full up. Like when you go into a hospital and you're admitted, you're monitored up, and they had access to that full data stream. But we wanted to see if there was performance gains if we got biomarker data or lab data in association with wearable data, just to help inform bigger portfolio areas that we have in the Armatus program. So there is performance gains if you do labs with vitals. But vitals alone, we're still able to do clinically hours before clinical suspicion up to 2 days. So 2 days in advance of any clinical suspicion, a microlab ordering, a note in it, we were able to identify that a patient might be coming down with a hospital-acquired infection. So this is great. This is exciting. This is, but some of the best data that we can get access to. A wearable watch, like I described, is not medical-grade data in full ECG, waveforms that you get from a medical field. So how do we take this to the next step? Sorry, I forgot about this slide. This is the performance curve of that hospital-acquired infection class. So again, 0.8 under the area rock curve is great, but this was a comparison of other diagnostic tests that we're familiar with, a Lyme disease test, a blood-based test for cancers, for prostate cancer, for breast cancers, some liquid biopsies, and you could see the rate algorithm is called rate. You can see how the performance matches almost to some of those diagnostic tests that we trust, right? You go to the doctor and you want to know if you have cancer, they're going to run a cancer test on you and your blood. And the algorithm that's coming out of this is equally as performant as some of those FDA-regulated tests, which is exciting for us. So again, the stepping stone to let's do more and see where we can get to this, or if it breaks at some point when we get out of line. So we did a whole host of studies. I'm not going to go into all these, but the rate COVID study I'm going to talk about in great detail, but we also had a PrEP study which was looking at vaccine challenges. So one of the challenges is we don't know when someone becomes sick or exposed to something, right? We can collect data and we can understand when they're symptomatic or when they might test positive, but we don't actually know the exposure. But we can test with vaccines a lot. So we can ethically give someone a vaccine. We know when that dose was given, and we could see if we can back calculate when it was with the data that changed after the vaccine. But it's kind of a reverse problem, right? We're trying to detect that someone is ill, but we've given them the exposure and then trying to detect it in the future. So it's kind of a reverse proxy for it. We did studies on some opioids and phosphates, so that people were going into dental procedures, received opioid dosage to see if we can get a chemical capability in that space. And then we did an exploration of monitoring with standoff detection capability, like I said. So if I don't have to put a watch or a ring on an individual, can I do it something with cameras and get those same types of features, which is exciting. We've had some successes with some of our companies. India National Labs are not listed here, but one of the performer companies or industry partners that has performance to about 200 meters in distance for getting some of these features that we're interested in for algorithm to run. Okay, so I talked about that, the opioid study. So what they did is they exposed a microdose of an opioid, so 1/10 the medical dose of the opioid that they were going to get for their medical procedure, and then tried to build an algorithm with that. Some of these other studies were planned, but unfortunately COVID-19 happened and the pandemic really impacted the ability to recruit for some of these other studies. So that leads me to COVID-19 and the rate operational utility assessment. So again, I started this portfolio in 2016, we started this in 2016, and all the studies I've talked about up till now were through 2018 or so, in 2019. So it positioned us in an opportunity space to take advantage of a very unfortunate event, right? A global pandemic that we all lived through. But how can we leverage that and demonstrate this unique wearable capability and maybe help inform the development of it? So what we did was we quickly acquired wearable technology devices, so the Garmin Fenix 6 and the Oura Ring. We developed the capability to ask people to survey symptom tracking. We used the rate algorithm that was developed for the hospital-acquired infections to demonstrate the capability to see if it's performant for identifying COVID. And this was all de-identified data, and users had access to their data, and I'll show you a screen of what it looked like. But again, this was all under human subject research review, IRB protocols, consenting, and all voluntary. So the individuals were given the wearable devices. They were told to log into a web app every day and report any symptoms or any testing that they had done so that we could archive that. And then the results were then looked at and accumulated together to develop the algorithm that I'll speak to. Many end users in this use case, we supported a lot of senior leadership, a lot of medical personnel that were having to work, but really, this was an exciting opportunity for us to see where we could go with this. So to get to the results. So this is published results in the Nature Journal article on the bottom left, but we were able to identify a true positive COVID test 48 hours in advance of that test actually happening with a 0.8% accuracy or area under the ROC curve. So really exciting times there. So, this was able to look at subjects, data. We had full access to it. We did have some false alarms, in there, but their performance curves, as you see on the top left, are 0.8, 0.81, 0.82. So really excited, and this was really the first demonstration outside of the hospital setting that we could do something in the real world with real people, all military users, collecting this data and running this machine learning algorithm and really get the performance. And this was very exciting for the portfolio, for the bigger DoD to see that this is a success and this is something that we may want to make investments in. So where are we going now? We recognize that through all these studies and through some other partner studies, we're collecting a lot of data, and we needed a place to store that data. So we currently have a repository called Agent, where we've collected all of the wearable data for all of our studies. We're also collecting all of the other studies that other portfolio managers within Gisto have. So on the biomarker side, the omics side, we're housing all of that information. Some of the other federal agencies that we're working with, and DARPA and other agencies within the USG, are depositing their data, because as you get these bigger data sets, it's going to be more powerful to mine and do machine learning approaches on. So we recognized that there was a need to collect it somewhere, so we started up this capability. But it's not just a data warehouse or a data lake, but it's also an analyst workbench. So the idea with this is that we can't ship our data around anymore, right? It's becoming terabytes and petabytes of data. It's also not unclassified data, right? Some of this information is controlled unclassified information for us because it's DoD-centric data. So how do we bring the algorithm developers to our platform, let them run their development, their S&T on the platform, and not have to lose control of our data and have user role access to it. So we have this platform enabled, and it's sharing all the data. You can make cross-cohort study designs, so it's a really great opportunity to leverage all the great data that we have. So speaking of that great data, if you look in totality across all of our efforts, we have over 13,000 subjects of data, over 52 million hours of data collected. So that's really empowering when you think about machine learning approaches and AI. You're getting to big data, which is really where the future is, and some of what we did under the Phillips effort with RE. So what we did with that as well is we gave some of that data to new developers. So Phillips was a great partner for us. They did great success story with that. But we wanted to see if we just gave data to a few companies, what they could do with it with a short time frame. Phillips was embedded. They did all the surveys. They knew the study design from infancy all the way up to the conclusion. But we gave a set of data to 3 performers, and within 6 months, some of those performers had equal performance to what the Phillips capability was able to deliver. So that's exciting for us, again, to how we can leverage all the data we're bringing into the agent, but then we just give it to the great people in this room, the great people on the exhibit floor that have the smart data analytics and the backbones, and says, here's our problem set, here's the data, what can you get from it, and what solutions can you get, and how fast can you get it? So a really great demonstration of how bringing that data together can really quickly identify and create capability more fast. We're also looking at leveraging organoid technology, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, but I mentioned we can't expose humans to all of our chemical and biological threats, or many of them, or any of them at all. I would love to have the day that the DoD says we don't do any human primate testing anymore. So organoids is a way to do that. So based on human cell lines, we have created organ-on-a-chip platforms where we can do exposure studies, but do you have the same cardiac signals that are coming out of the cardiac cells? So we can build algorithms for that. We're looking at the neurological signaling that's happening in that. So we understand the impacts of those organ systems with these bio threats, but we do it in an ethical way, in a sustainable way, and not have to use animal models. So what are we looking for in the future? And I'll finish up with this, is we have a great data set that we've collected, but we're looking for a more diverse set of data. So how can we expand beyond COVID? We have 750 cases of COVID, but only about 250 cases of other infection diseases. We also relied on survey information to train our models, which was informative, but also problematic at times too. So a new study design, on the horizon is doing something that has the medical surveillance part of it as well. So diagnostic testing every day or every couple days, so that we have a true truth label for making informed decisions. And then, like I mentioned, the organoid technology. So how can we use those organoid systems to expose those to the chemical and biological threats we're really concerned with? Build an algorithm against that data, test it against the human data that we have. So we're going to start with COVID exposures because we have a great capability in COVID. So if we understand how the organoid systems change, the algorithms we develop off of that, test that algorithm against the COVID human data, and show that is a promising pathway, then that opens up a huge opportunity space for us to do all the exposures for all the chemical and biological threats and develop a truly holistic capability for wearable technologies. So, there's a couple of opportunities here. So if you want to watch for opportunities within my organization at PICHTR, the PICHTR CV Fundamental Research and Applied Research broad agency announcement. Those links are there. We also work with an MTech OTA, the Medical Technologies Consortium. We often put up solicitations on that OTA opportunity space as well. And with that, I think I'm done, and hopefully I did right on time. So I'm happy to take any questions if there's any questions about this, but I'll be around as well. Yeah?
What do you, if you could wave a magic wand and do an integrated early warning with other intelligence layers, what are you dreaming of would be next?
That's a great question. So I think, Dr. O'Connor kind of mentioned that this is one of many layers. So if we think of compiling out some of the biomarker data that we have, some of the open source information that is out there of what's happening in the public, right? So our warfighters are just involved in the public as we are, right? So understanding what the threat looks like openly is important. But then looking at some of the emerging technologies like wastewater screening and sampling and how we can use sequencing. I think as you build all these layers together, you're going to get to success ratios of 0.9, 0.95 when you combine all those things together. So those are some of the exciting things, and how we could do this in a more uniform way and standoff kind of way, globally, right? We have a global problem. We just don't have a local problem. So we need to have sustainable solutions that can be deployed everywhere at cost, but brings in data, accessible data, and some of the unique data sources that we may have access to that we need to be able to plug into. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
To understand, you're mainly looking at the technology and the study as a scientist, right? But once, the employment side of this is where we start into the issues, when we start talking about privacy rights, policy, all the rest of that stuff, integrating with other intelligences, now just turned your biomarkers into an intelligence collection. We're talking about United States citizens. You're probably in violation, have to get a waiver, probably not unaware of the situation. So as you're developing the technology, in order to make sure we get it employed, what are y'all doing to either interface with senior leaders or work on these policy challenges that you're going to have ethically and legally?
That's a fantastic question that I hope Mr. McCormick is going to cover with the pilot study that we executed. And I did kind of skip the slide, and I probably should have skipped the slide, but there are those things that we need to be challenged with in the concept of operations. When we think from a biosurveillance perspective, and if we can get the use case out there that we can make you more informed about your personal decisions and your actions, and maybe you have access to that data, but at the group level or the broader levels, it's compiled, so it's not individual. There's also the regulatory pathway that we could potentially go down this as well. So we could do wellness, and you could do wellness without regulatory pathway, but if we try to do recovery or predictive analytics of saying you're going to return on this date or you're looking severe, that's when we have to go down the regulatory pathway and the full FDA regulatory process that will be established. But I think Mr. McCormick will cover a lot of the questions on what we did in the pilot study and some of the lessons that we learned that we executed in that. And if not, he can answer them later. But great question. It is a very valid concern.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
When you were talking earlier about partnering with other companies to how they can use that data, is that something that's still going on, or was that for a particular study you did, or?
It was a small study, but I think as we do the next data collection, we're going to have another round of algorithm development, right? So that'll be happening. The next data collection will be within this year is the goal of finding a cohort that we can study on that has routine recruits coming in and a high incidence of infection cases. So we know some of those classes where you bring in a lot of people together for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, right, or 2 months from all parts of the different country or the globe. The first 6 weeks, there's incidence of 40% of illness, right? Whether it's a musculoskeletal or an illness. So it's an opportunity for us to learn from. Once we collect that data, there will be the next opportunity to do an algorithm refinement with all the data we've collected before and this additional data to layer on to broaden out the capability beyond the COVID demonstration that we did.
To get, I guess, find out how to learn more about that and get involved, how do you, is that from one of the links that you
So it
shared
would be, what I would look is, the EdTech, or, I think we're collecting all the names here, the people that are scanned in as well, and we'll add you to the Rolodex of, when we make announcements out, we try to do the marketing of those announcements. So, we try to align those announcements with events like this, and it didn't line up for this one yet, but for other events where we bring out and say, we have an open RFI, or the RFP is coming next week, here's a summary of it. We can still talk to you, but the minute the RFP gets announced, we can't talk to you anymore. All right, so there's kind of a fine line. We try to time it so that, like at the S&T conference, we can make announcements potentially that says, 2 weeks, go look for this because we're about to announce it. We could talk to you now, but in 2 weeks, I can't talk to you again until you submit. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Thought I saw nothing. Yes, sir.
So what is the criteria for devices to be integrated into your protocol?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we understand the input accuracy and precisions of the devices to make sure that they work with the algorithm. We trained on Aura and Garmin devices, and that's an OR statement. We have capability with both. So if you have both devices on you, we have capability, but if you have one or the other. So we have a lab, the Air Force Research Lab has a lab that looks at the commercial technologies that are coming out and comparing it to gold standards, and they do a quick 2-week assessment of how well is that capability that's commercially available aligned to gold standard heart rate monitoring and medical monitoring. But I think that's one of the things that we're looking at and focusing with the advanced developer is when this gets implemented, how do you bring your own device and how do you know that you're going to have a performant algorithm if you bring your own device? So making sure that we have the standards of it's got to have 80% or 85% accuracy in the heart rate and the respiration and temperature fields to be performant in this. And if you don't meet that criteria, then you can't use that device in this operational environment.
Got it. And a follow-up question, what if the innovation is actually an algorithm that integrates data from other devices?
So if you have an algorithm that's, are you saying? Yeah, I'm happy to chat more about, what you have in demonstrating capability. I think that will be, within future announcements as well, is that if you already have an algorithm that you want to demonstrate against this new data set, which is always a great challenge, right? Is we have a unique data set, bring your algorithm to us, and let's see if you have true capability or not on a data set that you've never seen before. So in that agent platform, we have a holdout of data that isn't exposed to anyone for that very case for testing, evaluation, and validation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Environmental data. I know we plugged COVID and influenza with wearables such as the watch and rings. How about something a little bit closer to home, hypothetical water contamination? How are we also tracking those type of environmentals as a data set?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my portfolio, and Dr. O'Connor did a little bit on this as well, is that the integrated early warning is the overarching capability we're trying to develop. So I have a small piece. There's another STM manager that has wastewater and looking at environmental detection capabilities, and it's bringing that pipeline and technology and architecture together to put those pieces together into the ultimate solution of biosurveillance and being able to identify. So, we have, I can give you the person's name, or we can get you in contact with people that are on the wastewater side of it, and how we're bringing it all together for unknown pathogen surveillance and detection. Does that address your question, sir? I don't know if I kind of punted it, but I'm happy to meet up with you. Yeah.
So I think that pretty highlight on that one. So part of the integrated early warning and the biosurveillance architecture would be the interface with interagencies and working with people like the EPA or even state and local authorities and getting information from them on alerts for water quality. At the DoD, we have active water quality monitoring programs in service to support the warfighter in the field. So those data can be, not the data necessarily, but the results, or we can be queried. So we want to tie into the other agency efforts, so we don't need to be redundant and do everything under the DoD umbrella, but tie into those other aspects.
It's not necessarily live though, so that data would be old. So our idea is having sensors and live data feeding, so we have relevant data continuously.
So some of that, as
I think we're moving it, not to speak, but I think we are moving in a direction where we are looking to do live sensors for some of those technologies and not waiting on a 2-week lag. But in the meantime, is how can you integrate those data together to better inform, right? So it might be 2-week lag, but that now gives a commander a decision space or more confidence in what might have happened or might have happened in it. You can still leverage old data, but it's a little bit more challenging when you're trying to make a real-time assessment or a real-time decision. But I think we are trying to make big investments in real-timeness and net connectivity for real sensors of wastewater or water quality or air quality for that measure. But like Mike is saying, it's not just DoD. It's how do we leverage other partners that are making those advancements for their missions. And back to your question, ma'am, how do those data come in together holistically to make the bigger integrated early warning capability a true capability? All right. Okay. Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Speakers mixed up there, so thank you, Mr. Perkins, for that excellent presentation. And so, and now we'll have Mr. Daniel McCormick give his talk. All right. 3 for 3.
We're really in trouble after those 2 briefs. We went smart and really smart, and now you're getting me. And I'm already set up with some questions, so it's a very dangerous position to be in. And you've got my old slides here.
Let me see if I have another set.
Yeah.
Jeff?
So let's start here, because it's a small group. You know who we are. I don't know who you are. So I'm just going to ask some base categories. How many government folks are there that are sitting amongst the 12th grade? And how many academia? Any academia? Awesome. And the rest is industry, or just wandered in off the street for the free food? Industry. Okay, great. Hopefully we're going to get my slides up, or I'm going to be really lost.
We don't have any other slides. This is what we received.
No. Put it in an email.
Let me see. Who did you send that email to?
Do you want?
Yeah, we'll take it.
Weeks ago, I have no idea the names on there.
When did you send it in? Here they are. Where can we send them?
He just sent them.
Oh, he did.
Yeah. that was Adam I sent email.
It's sent again.
Oh, take a look.
Yes, October 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern.
I didn't see it go out.
All right, let's try it again.
They said it went out.
Chris, do you have the slide? I have what what Dave sent. That's exactly what I have.
I sent them. I was the first one to send the slides.
October 16th at 11 a.m.
I'll just go, okay. To me.
Yeah, you're on it. Chris is on it.
Yeah.
We did.
Perhaps it's on.
It's okay.
October 8th is when it's sent.
October 16th
Chris, on October 16th.
at 11 a.m.
You're gonna get
At 11 a.m. Eastern.
Eastern. Right.
4:30.
Go out and doing the same data set, because when you do your ethical study, when you do your study, you submit to the IRB, you're say what your study is used for, and now you go back to the data set, use it for something else without consent of the people.
So part of the consent was secondary research.
Perfect.
Or other research findings that was already part of the appropriate side.
I figured it was.
Which wasn't done in everybody across DOD's studies, but we.
Yeah, we did. Right.
So we're stuck on some data sets.
Some of the
We
data sets
can't-
you can't use because it was under a demonstration, so.
But you go back and find all those people again.
Right.
That's
So
right.
that data just got into the repository, the algorithm ran, they saw the results, and then it was correct.
Yeah, I tried to slow that my last IRB, and everyone's like, no, you've got, you're not doing that. I'm like, Greg, if it's, the university's like, it's 20 piece. You can find wearables.
Because you don't have to work on those same 20 people again 5 years from now.
That's
right?
exactly
So
right.
those
Yeah.
impossible 5 years from now.
Yeah, I mean, especially, military, I'm having to find dates.
I can help
I've
you.
got stuff like,
Not by myself.
like I said, not dealing with communication stuff, so I just I'm just so tired. The same people say, yes, I want to do this, but my projects.
No, that's not it. That's what I just downloaded.
Aerophysical type stuff.
Okay.
And I.
Let's check, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of demonstration.
Yes, yes.
But I will,
That's what you just forwarded in.
So I've got it right here, Dan, and this is the one, right? The one that starts with what is
Yeah,
wearable?
it has 2 blue slides, that's it.
This
So,
is it.
and this is the
one I have
slide
from
that's
the-
attached. So,
This is the one I have from
October 8th.
no, it's October 16th.
This was, so this one literally says 16. This is the one I just put up there. So,
Can you forward off his phone?
Yeah,
yeah,
so O'Keefe, right?
that's me.
Challenges.
And it's restlesscreation.com.
That's the one literally, you just forwarded that over.
And I just said, it's big.
Yeah, it's a mystery because there's the message I forwarded. There's the attachment.
Yeah.
And it's,
And here we are, 11:30. And when you pop it up, there it is. It's very strange. I don't know what's happened. It's literally, it even says as of 10:16. All right, so you're coming in now.
We'll need
All
the
right.
data
It's strange. It's in the truck.
They've already it's weird why. I'll figure it out. It's like a automatic thing
It's just, it's weird, but.
I mean, literally, I'm looking at his email.
and my challenge is that other set isn't all clear, you know, for, there's nothing in it that I'm worried about. I just don't have it. Did you get Dave's, Chris?
Not yet.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if they those
Okay. All right, we got it.
I sent it to Chris. Well, he hasn't had, maybe he's got it now.
it may be starting.
And I'll put the source code.
11 a.m.
You might not have gotten
And
it
you can,
because your system doesn't have
you can
slides.
do back to back, you know.
Or you could stop it.
I mean, in certain size packages.
Yeah. Because they also like to clean things and figure out how to understand it. Which is fine. It's just more like that's not it.
So here, let's look at these. So,
Tall and
this is
but
the
these
one,
are
right?
I guess, or just send it to you just now.
So when I scroll
the
down,
other things way.
I'm going.
Yeah, while we're restarting here, if anybody wants to schedule one-on-one meetings, just use the QR code.
I'm gonna go with it, and now I'm doing multiple versions, right? I pull it, okay, this is what I'm seeing. So, feel like that. So I'm not sure there's like a hidden slide.
So why is that? So this is what I've got, and that is not what you have.
Yeah,
And I just sent this to you.
is your guys' thing stricken? I have literally no idea.
There's no way it can. I mean, there's nothing else on your phone.
I've never seen anything like this because it also the same problem to
We just put my phone up to the, I mean, can we do something with this? Is it connected? I mean, I'm just curious, because I don't know why it's not.
Dave, try to send it to me, and I'll see if I
Okay, hang on.
if it looks different. PDF it.
Oh, well, I can't.
No,
get you on the phone.
okay.
I'll send it to you, Ed.
Let's see.
I'll PDF it on my computer.
I can PDF it.
So weird. I really don't know.
I mean, I'm not, there's no other attachment to this message, right? No.
I mean, literally. You're looking at the same thing.
That is really bizarre.
I have no idea.
That is really bizarre.
China's really want that line.
I guess.
I have no clue. Like, this
Is
is.
it just one slide? Or do we got that?
No, it's like it's a different presentation. What does yours say? What does it say on the front? I mean, when you go
Yeah.
attachment. This is the, someone looking at the QR code presentation to CPR and industry.
It goes there. 23 October.
Is there anything hidden, or is there?
I've dealt with it really a lot.
I mean, here in Texas, or in general.
Yeah, what is a wearable? There it is. Oh, sorry.
This is just really approved.
What is this?
The way you can tell is the first two slides.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to.
No, it's not it.
Yes, I
No.
I'm Charity D, CEO of PICHTR.
We met when you guys were here at
Oh.
the pitch
Like,
day.
that was like
Yeah.
February,
Don't know
March.
what's happening in between.
It was right before post.
Thank you
Yes.
for your faith in us. I totally been having a lot. Who should we be meeting with? Because all the sand companies are meeting.
I'm stumped.
We're about the software.
I'm stumped too. It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, check my map here. This is, it says literally 10, 24, 16, right?
I say
24,
we.
10, 16.
Matt built physical things. Matt Summers is our VP engineer. He was our head of product.
There you go,
Designed all
24,
the
16.
complexity.
Yeah.
Looking forward to maybe some demos and some
There's nothing off on this one. This is beyond me.
It sort of was like, went back to my day job, just, overseeing the strategy of where all those viruses
So we sent it to Jeff Warren.
So I haven't been, so I don't get on the phone call, like the status of things, I just got on time. We'll be at.
We all have to see.
Yeah, yes, yeah.
Come up in a minute.
Probably sure.
I'm like,
This is very, very on these slides.
yeah.
Let me just flip through them and see what I can do.
All right, so let's go.
Some version of the slide.
Yeah, definitely.
She's on my team and she's working title as director for biosurveillance.
She's one of my favorite people. She's the only one on Indiana now who's asked questions.
No, what's weird is, I think we're gonna get it on my phone. The one I just sent you.
Questions are always so insightful in the sense that what we're doing is the iceberg. Thought process.
Yeah. That's where I was sort of like, I need to put you in the shoes. She on my team, she was the understanding portfolio manager of the physical team. So she had oversight of all of our sensing, characterization.
Still not?
We're going to detection of problems. And biosensors.
All right, yeah, pull up the other one. The other one. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kick it back off. We're going to kick it back off here. Dan's going to do a little bit of an ad lib.
How that ties into other sensing systems. So that's what there was an opportunity for me to sort of step back and like, not enough to do two jobs, but also
Sorry about that, folks. Wait, somewhere in the internet is a set of slides that match what is sent. Translation. But don't worry, we're going to be seamlessly integrated across the department at the end of it. Dan McCormick, head IT. No. So 28 years active Army officer. Came into this chem bio world with the anthrax letters. They pulled me off the Army staff and I did response to that. And once you're in, you're in. Did my 05 command as a PM in this, my 06 command as a PM in this. Retired, went to Afghanistan, retired, came back and I got pulled into the headquarters as a civilian, same job, different suit, was the deputy PEO, retired from that a couple years ago. They pulled me back as a retired annuitant to run the pilot for the department, which the DASD was tasked to do on wearables. I took over from Dave Restione, so the start of the pilot was all Dave, and then the end of the pilot was all me. So any of the hard questions was Dave's, and we'll turn it there, and any of the easy questions all him. Kristen showed the mission vision slide for the DASD. Our mission vision slide goes right down, right? We're a sub-unit from them. We do the material development, and as Kristen said, we're integrated defense, and so is our portfolio for stuff that we're doing material development on. So boots, suits, gloves, decon, prophylaxis, diagnostics, therapeutics, sensors, and wearables is a piece of that. Command and control system to pull it all together, push it onto JADC Square, where we will integrate with the warfighters at all echelons. Before I jump into wearables, you might ask, what is a wearable, right? Because a wearable can be a lot of things. Body armor is a wearable, the uniform is a wearable, but when we're talking wearable, we're really pulling the data off the skin, out of the body, and that's what we're interested when we talk CBRN wearable. So all those other things we have to integrate with, we have to be cognizant of, we actually go back and forth with, but when we're doing a wearables program, we are pulling physiological data off the person. Why are we doing it? Well, it's a huge risk area. You see in all the statements of all the services, a more lethal ready force, right? Well, readiness is all about the warfighter and the equipment. We've had diagnostics of equipment for years. Check engine lights on everything. An airplane, before it comes back, tells them to change this part. And so they get the part waiting, the crew's waiting. The soldier, on the other hand, comes back, and sometime after they retire, they go to the VA and they get fixed, right? So we want to get, and some of us have those, right, in our kit bag. We want to get a little left of that. We want to actually be able to support readiness of operations. And there's real stuff out there, right? I think everybody remembers a couple Navy ships where fatigue was a big issue in training. And so obviously the Navy is very concerned in looking at and investing heavily in what is the readiness of my watch bill, what is their training, and am I scheduling them correctly to prevent those kind of things. I think the aircraft carrier during COVID was a perfect example of, if you can get left, you don't have to bring an aircraft carrier into port. Sort of a huge thing when you're talking 11 or 12 of those big bad boys, right? And several other cases of pointing out why wearables is really, really important. There, during the pilot, we looked all the way across DoD. There is multiple hundreds of millions of dollars being invested in all corners of the DoD. And so I'll go into some of the pilot results on another slide, and I'll talk through them. But they're in all of these areas. We're not doing all of those areas. Others are, but we are, because it's the same device, it's different algorithms and different comm means, but it's the same data. And how do we leverage that data? How do we have common devices? Don't want to dictate that. Don't necessarily need a $1,200 Garmin 8 to be able to know your heart rate when you go for a run. You can do that cheaper than that. But if you want that sensitivity and selectivity to get to infectious disease, if the heart rate monitor that gets you into the zone for a run doesn't get you there, then you got a trade-off, and the department needs to weigh those. There's three basic environments that we lump everything into, right? So you got garrison. I'm in normal operations, I'm training, I'm eating, I'm sleeping, I'm going downtown, and we want to know what's going on in your body, because it impacts, are you ready to do more training? It impacts, are you ready to go do your mission? And it gives us a baseline to see when you are doing those other things, have I slipped off it? Then there's the environment of training, and there's a spectrum of that. I'm going to the firing range, that's sort of an admin training thing. I'm doing force on force, that's a rehearsal for the big time, and so we want to see how you're reacting during that. And then there are operations. Each one of them have different networks, each one of them have different chains of commands, and each one of them have different threats to the body. And so those are the environments we try to weigh as we're looking at any one of our systems. Ultimately, one device, one algorithm that rules them all across all operations and seamless comms. That's all we want. So if you have that system, bring it on up, we'll pay with a check today. That isn't the case that's out there, and we all know it. And so we're weighing these things as we're looking at solutions. As I mentioned, a wearable's capability is 3 basic pieces of a system. You got the device pulling the data off the human, whether it's doing it with a watch and a ring with light, whether it's doing it with a continuous glucose monitoring kind of technology and pulling the interstitial fluid, the markers in that, so you're not doing a correlation, you're actually seeing the reaction of the body, or some other presence, but the device is pulling that data. Some devices have algorithms. Some algorithms need to run on laptops, some need a Cray computer to run, not really. But you have the algorithm being worked, and you have a decision support tool. And the decision support tool could be on the device, it could be in a computer, or it could be on JADC2, or a combination of all of those. So I know there's nuances, but we do those bins, and then there's the transport of that and storage of that information in that capability. That's the space that we're looking at in the 3 environments. Then you go, what is the actual use case? And you keep refining that down, but it starts with this overarching. Any questions or comments on that? Because that's probably not a bad place to pause. Ed did a phenomenal job. His slides actually worked. And he came up and he told us what happened to the left. And he's continuing to work. We were there with him, supplementing the teams during these studies, putting our folks from the advanced development community, because he was really rushing during COVID. Really, it was COVID where we put a bunch of people on him to expand it, but that's what he did. That brings us forward and into the pilot. So the pilot looked at several things. It not only looked across DoD to see what people were doing, what they were doing in the policy space, what they were doing in the regulatory space, where they were investing, what they were investing, what their timelines were. But it also was our chance to run some more continued experimentation. And we went to events like Talisman Sabre with Indo-PACOM, and we equipped them with this capability so that we could garner feedback during it. Some of the key pieces of the pilot, and I'll get to them. The description of readiness is a nascent description across the services. I'll use the Army because I was one, and so you can blame me for butchering it. When you go to a battalion commander and you go, who's in charge of readiness? He says, he is, and the sergeant major says, and I do it for him. But the staff is mumbling because the S1 says, I'm in charge of readiness because I do all of the paperwork and I make sure all the medical records in concert with the PA are there so that we can deploy. And the S3 says, I'm in charge of readiness because I do training and I know the training readiness of my unit. The Loggy says, the S4 says, I'm in charge of readiness because I know when the equipment and the food and the bullets get there, and that isn't a command and control process and system. There are some, but it's pretty much a tote board, and it's pretty basic math if I'm ready or not. And there's a lot of gut feel for it. All of a sudden we have insight. And those processes need to be pulled out, and those user cases need to be pulled out. And that's a whole change. While this is moving at the speed of billions and billions of dollars of IRAD every year, that enables things that we're not even thinking about yet, and we're still back at the analog stage. So the pilot highlights that. Didn't say the fix. The real fix is work those user cases with each of the services and each of the subunits, and we're going into that. During the pilot, we did pieces of that. We did Army, we did Navy, we did Marine Corps, we did Air Force in set user cases, and we started to develop those things. What are the other findings? Cyber's gonna be a bear. Duh. Cyber's a bear for everybody. This thing pulls it off the skin, throws that data up to a proprietary cloud. And that proprietary cloud sends it back to you and you get your readings. Mine says my body battery is low and I should finish my talk and take a rest. And everybody that can tap into that cloud knows it. So there's a cyber challenge with that, right? There's a bandwidth challenge. Do I want all that data flowing all the time if all I want to know is Ed okay against heat right now? No, the algorithm can stay right down here and we can churn it. And those trade-offs we need to work through. So those findings, in a year-long pilot were documented and brought forward. Policy and regulatory. So I'll do regulatory first to just keep the policy, which is a real bear of a question.
Always the worst one.
Regulatory. You got diagnostics, we know what to do with diagnostics. You go to the FDA and the companies that do diagnostics and us, we're very practiced at that. Surveillance doesn't require FDA clearance, but surveillance is de-identified groups of people. Suddenly I'm able to see individuals within it. So FDA, I am going to require 510K clearance of this device, but I don't need to prove it like a diagnostic. And you're sort of in a new space. When you look at what Garmin and Oura are doing, they're going, it's not surveillance, it's the individual's data, they're choosing to do it, and they went to the FDA, and FDA said, that's not a diagnostic device. That's surveillance, we don't do those. And we're sort of just on that line. And so we all have to work through that. We have good ties with the FDA. It's actually logical what we're going to have to prove. We just have to do it. And we really haven't. We've done IRBs and we protect that, and we haven't had to go to the FDA yet. But when we actually go out and do this, we've got to make that step. Privacy policies are a bear. We've done it under IRBs, so people came in and said, I'll do it. And what we really found is if you offer a young warfighter girl or man an $800 watch, they'll sign up for almost anything. And so we got plenty of people. You know, the Oura ring, wow, I can't afford an Oura ring, but you're giving me one? Yeah, I'll sign up and I'll give away my rights to privacy. Well, we've all given up our rights to privacy, right? So there's one where you do it freely because you want to be able to surf the internet, and then there's another one the government wants to monitor your body. So how do you get to the writing of policy highlighted in the pilot report? You don't get policy writers to do theoretical. They won't do it. They'll come in and go, well, here's the spectrum of what we need to do in policy. They won't put pen to paper and staff it and sign it. So what have we done as we've moved from pilot into programs? We're working with communities. I'm going to show you the capability needs statement from Indo-PACOM. But we've got urgent needs from AMC, Air Mobility Command. And they recognize this problem, and if that gets through Headquarters Air Force staffing and is approved, one line of effort, and we've already got the lawyers and the policy people to write the policy. And what we're looking at is, you want to open it up to the environment of all of Garrison, 24/7, 365. That's a big step for people in the policy world to step. We could do it. DoD has the authority to order it. Are they going to? It's sort of like the cell phones. We're going to take your cell phone so you can't be on base, so you can't be tracked and sharing data and sending pictures. Well, we also want to recruit warfighters, and we have trouble doing that, so we don't take their cell phones, right? So they they trade off that stuff. What we're doing is saying, that's too big a bite for the first bite. So we're looking at the Air Mobility Command mission and saying for MEO operations, Max and Doris operations, where I've got the tyranny of distance in the Indo-PACOM theater to deal with, they're gonna come up and they need to be prepping for that mission. They get the mission, we equip them with the stuff, they're within the envelope of that mission, and the indicators from AMC leadership is they will direct the wearing of a wearables then. So yes, they're going home, yes, they're doing PT, but it's within that window. But they need to do it so that they understand the current condition of their crew, establish their baseline for the whole mission. So that's how we're doing it. We'll do that chunk, and then we'll start to exploring moving to the left. What I saw during the time that I took the pilot over from Dave, so the last couple of years, is a movement of that needle with warfighters. Very, very concerned. Everybody was up in arms. You'll never get me to wear this. Yeah, okay. The other part of the policy that has to be codified is, I'm not going to use this data to search you out to see where you went last night. I cannot use it for that. I will not use it for that. But I'm also not going to tell you that under a warrant, I'm not, and you were a suspect in a murder or a rape last night. It's just like any other device you have. It can be discovered, and they can ask for it. We can't protect that. So in the user agreement that the warfighter will have to have, that's going to have to be specified, and we'll work through those. It is not written down yet. So I hope that answers the...
It does, and that's kind of where I was, just as a operator myself,
Yeah.
I know that if I, and just all of my fellow operators, that if they were going to not protect that privacy, you're not going to get good data, because that thing does not get put on. Because I don't need my commander knowing how much I drank last night, or how much ibuprofen I took over what my doctor told me I was supposed to do, because it's all they give me when I go to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. The other question I have for copy that you got a urgent operational need from AMC. Do you need any other MAGCOMs? Any other MAGCOMs to give you an urgent need statement, or is that going to be sufficient?
Our biggest problem right now is a requirement. You can't do agile development. You can't break.
Yep.
I mean, this stuff is ready.
So
we got fantastic algorithms. We've got great support from the sponsor that we literally have the money. You can look at the P&R forms. There's over $40 million a year in the DASD's budget on this, and I don't have a requirement. So anybody that can get a requirement through their process, whether it's, I know Mike, Dr. von Fonestock is working Indo-PACOMs, AMC's is literally sitting at half Air Force right now. We are interested in anybody that brings it, because until you do it once you've established this architecture, you've established the policy for one use case, you've established the cyber, you've established the storage of data, and you work those, it is easy to take the newest device, the newest algorithm, and plug it in, tweak the policy, tweak the user agreement, and agilely put it out into the force. So yes is the answer, and we'll love to talk to you.
So another aviation MAGCOM that does max endurance operations, such as global strike operations, would be welcome.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Are you aware of ILSIN Air Force's base's use of all the devices you just mentioned for force readiness?
Yeah. So not the details of it, but we saw many. It's everywhere. People are buying. DHA, public source, just put $96 million of Aura rings on contract. Now that's the ceiling. How many they actually purchased? Probably $20 million. It's all over the place. But if you can link us up,
yes, sir.
We'd love to. Especially around policy and cyber and that, because there's some great capabilities out there. It's tying them together. The Army, just to give you a feel for it, Garmin watch. The guys that are doing assured position, location, timing, using the Garmin watch. The soldier systems are using it for heat and rest. And we as ChemBio want to use it to look for infectious disease indication and heat in mod. There's a great opportunity not to buy 3 watches. Or to set up something that is a proprietary system through one cloud that doesn't allow us to get all the data we need to be able to talk. So would love to do that.
So you're probably going to address this in another part of the deck, but secure classified information facilities. How are we, I understand that the intelligence community has waivers for authorization for some of this stuff. They're ahead of it. Have you guys gone any further so that you all are going, or that your department's going to have some say in this, or are we going to continue to allow the intelligence community to dictate that?
I imagine we're going to continue to go to the NSA and get that certification for it. And it's ever increasing challenge, right? The Garmin 8 that just came out for $1,100 or $1,200 has a microphone. Why? Because the commercial market requires it. They want to compete with Apple and the other smartwatches.
Right.
You need to be able to talk to it. I need to do a phone call. I ain't getting in there with that, right? So we've got those challenges. Yeah, Chris.
So outside of the policy stuff, obviously, have you seen any technical gaps that companies could possibly think about filling? What is missing as you survey the landscape?
Yeah. So no, that's a great lead in, and I probably didn't need any slides for this talk. So there's some real key areas. Algorithms on the edge, right? I need to be able to do multiple algorithms on this, which is very challenging right now. But I need to be able to do it here, because if I'm interested in looking at heat in a denied comms environment, I can't pump this data, which I have 2 minutes to react to, through a cloud system that I can't talk to and get it back down. So I need to do multiple. I need to do infectious disease, and I need to do heat, and I need to do some other tasks that were in that big circle of physiological monitors. So the more efficient and forward I can get an algorithm is huge. The other piece is Navy ship. I'm interested in sleep. I've got a Marine Corps unit on the ship. I got all the sailors on the ship. They're sleeping at different times, and I have nodes up to pick up the signal and harvest the data out of it so that each one of them doesn't have to harness in and do it. I need somebody to help me hack Bluetooth to be able to, as I walk through the ship, node. It takes 3 minutes to download. I need to do better than that, and I also need to deconflict. I can't have 100 guys going to chow and overload that system, and that's what happens right now. So that's a technological challenge. Bluetooth hacking for that would really help us out. As Ed said, if you got an algorithm that does something in this space, we want to see it. If you've already got a way, you're already looking at it. And commercial is, right? So, almost all of the heat algorithms that tell you have heat risk comes from the Usarium model out of Natick. And so they're all using it. It's common. They're just doing different user experience and user interfaces for it. If you've got a good way to look at that, great. It's the dual use of this. As we saw at Talisman Sabre, yeah, infectious disease was interesting to the infantry company commander, but he really was worried about loading the worker because infectious disease was either going to come or it wasn't. Everybody had the sniffles, like every deployment anybody's ever been on, but it wasn't blipping our rate scores to say we've got an indicator of another pandemic. What he was interested in is we haven't gotten water and food resupply, and I'm about to send a resupply team, and they literally looked at the dual use, the battery body, and the other functions on it there. So we are interested in those that are already developed because they're cheap. We just put them on and there's great utility. And as in any system, if they use it every day, waiting for the infectious disease moment, that's great because they're actually keep it on their wrist. They actually keep it on their finger. They they do the chest strap, whatever. Yeah.
So, we have a ton of in our network, about 100 different universities, all the major engineering ones, plus early stage stuff. What types of, so when, like, let's say I have an academic who's focused on Bluetooth enhanced bandwidth, for example, what should they do with that? Like, they're working on a project.
Yes.
Into your jet.
To get to us?
Yeah. Is that into your jet?
Into jet. And I'll go into that at the end. There is a slide. And Kristen put up the QR code for it. The jet process is, this is one method, and we're going to have an opportunity to talk some more this afternoon, and then we're going to hang out, and if people have ideas now, we'll talk here. If we're real interested, we don't need to go to jet. But if you want to think about what was said here today, and you want to come and do a speed date session to go, this is what we are, this is what we're thinking, would this interest you? That's the speed dating jet. And then we have follow-on meetings if it's interesting. Or we go, yeah, we're not quite there, and we've had some jet topics where we go, but you need to talk to this PDO because they're working in that. And so we do that there. So jet is a great way. Obviously answering solicitations in the OTAs, and those are a lot of those are formed from the jet experience, right? We're not the only, well, these guys have a lot of great ideas and turn right into a request for proposal. But so much of that comes from these interactions to go, yeah, Bill said this and Mary said that, and I pull those ideas together, not proprietary ideas, but I'm looking for something like this. So that is the method. Indo-PACOM said, hey, I'm very interested in this. And they looked at it not just as the warfighters and the Indo-PACOM mission, but they've got an immediate everyday challenge with their leadership. I can't even imagine, I never was stationed in this beautiful place, but sitting here in Hawaii this morning when I was on the phone call at 4:30 with the East Coast, and knowing that tonight I was going to have to, at the other end, talk to Korea, it's an unbelievable challenge. Their leadership recognizes it, and they said, we have a problem and we want to look at the resiliency of our leadership, and we've done some efforts there. But they've captured what we're talking about in the needs statement, and this slide does it. So I always look at these problems, I'm a simple guy. I want to know what the situation is, I want to know what can be done about it, and I want to know who's going to do it, right? And that's every one of our sensor systems that are out there. And it's the same thing they're asking for in the physiological realm. I want to have situational awareness about what's going on with my leaders and my warfighters. I want to know what I can do about it, cross-load equipment. I'm going to have a trouble with tomorrow's and the next day's operation because the rate algorithm is saying I've got indicators that 50% of my force who have not gone in for diagnostics yet are going to in 2 days. That's pretty damn important information. And then the commander wants to know who's going to do something about that. 3, are you going to get me other 4, and 1, are you going to get me other forces? You're going to change the mission? Doc, are you going to make them healthy before they come in? I mean, whatever those reactions are, that's what they're asking for here as a system. OV. So every one of those use cases has unique pieces. Yesterday I was with the Hawaiian Chemical CST. Help me out, Mike. Civil Support Team, yeah, thank you. I've only been doing this for 1,000 years. So those are the guys in the bubble suit, and they're going to Ironman. Well, they're flying today, and they go and they sweep the place for bad methyl ethyl bad stuff, and they sit and are going to react. So we trained them on our system. We did the rehearsal of their mission yesterday, and they go, and we're going to go with them. I'm going to throw myself on that social hand grenade and go to the big gun. So what were they looking for? What's the condition of my warfighter? What can I do about it to change that? Not a lot you can do in an A suit, by the way, to make it more comfortable. And who's going to do it? Well, what did the insight yesterday that the medical guys saw? So they put on the suit, by looking at skin temperature, by looking at heart rate, and the weather forecast of the wet bulb, it will calculate the wet bulb for that individual. And then it'll bring it inside the cocoon of that suit, which he had never had before. He knows it's bad. Everybody knows it's bad. But what is it really? Now the medical commander can see the guy that is telling the commander, I'm used to Joe, he can handle anything, and he's off his baseline, and I know the conditions in his suit for this baseline, something's wrong, we need to think about something different. Pull him. They could see the wet bulb change inside that suit. In the hangar before the mission yesterday, wet bulb reading. Stepped out into the sun, within 2 minutes, it was 12 to 15 degrees warmer, instantly. And he could watch that. He knew it, but now he can quantify it, and he can start to capture real data, not just, I've watched Joe for 2 years, but he can profile those missions, and we can do that with a computer instead of a PA. Doesn't eliminate his skill set. He still has to interpret the data, he has to look at it, and he has to advise. But he doesn't have to remember all of that stuff. Powerful. I talked about the AMC on this. Got to get a baseline. Part of the med clearance of the crew, they can look at that also, so that the doc looks at that and looks at the normal checks for the medical, says the crew is ready. They get on the airplane and they go, they can monitor through, they get to the other end and they go into the hub and spoke. And you can monitor, and you can bring it back and monitor them post-mission for 10 days within the envelope to see if they're bringing anything with them that would, an indicator of anything with them. Powerful. Two very different use cases, but are examples of where we're going within the OV. I talked about the different use cases have different slider rules, right? So as we evaluate it, we need to set these and look for the system that's going to find the just right point. It's all the same data. It's all the same device. It's applying it to that mission set. I think we've done that pretty good. We're on a campaign of knowledge. So we are literally at the point where we recognize we need to stop studying this problem and we need to start fielding this problem, because the real difference in our learning process is going to come from the moment of first contact with an operation. I need everybody in this room for a classified brief. Okay, take everything off, right? You're immediately breaking things. Well, we know that, so we're already accounting for that. What don't we know in the process of it? And you're not going to get it until we do it. So those are the next steps. The DASD is all in, has given us guidance, literally without a requirement from the end of the pilot, where we were doing experimentation, said, continue experimentation. We're out here this week for BG. Wearables is a big piece of it, with the intersection of wastewater and other sensor technologies into a IEW capability. But there's only so long you can go with that. And we are ready for the step to a program, and it's funded, which is a really great place to be in the DoD. I'm looking for something that I don't know, that I didn't already cover. One of the areas that I didn't cover was in the chem bio world. We're also looking at it to see in the protective posture, can I detect the change that says, I got 100 guys out there, I told them all to mask, I now have to run 200 meters in every direction looking to make sure that everybody is masked within the 9 seconds that they had to do that standard. I'm not going to get to the guy that has failed in time, but if the physiological monitor sees the respiratory rate change and the indicators that they have gone to a protective posture coinciding with the command to go to the protective posture, I now know to go look for Dave Restione. He's always asleep when he gets this order, and he's the guy. I'm going to go to him. Just like the heat. You're out on patrol and you've got guys spread over 100 meters. The medic's making his rounds, the leaders are making the rounds, battle buddies are checking on each other. But if you can, go, I've got a problem over there, the medic doesn't have to make the trip as often, which keeps his resiliency up. Those kind of things are out there, which I didn't cover earlier. That's the jet, and we'll have access to this. So you got us today. We'll talk to you. We'll listen to your ideas. This is another method of getting to us. These are the different ways we do industry days. There are initiatives where we'll do small spark initiatives. Hey, here's a good idea. We've got a little money set aside to do a quick look on those. There are the processes that Ed talked about, the SIVR process, where we will support proposals, but it all comes out of the engagements, right? We do have the OTAs, which really have helped us move from S&T to advanced development into the initial procurement, so we don't slow down as we move through it. More importantly to me, in an OTA, we put out the question, you come back with your proposal, and if it's close, we get to sit down at a table and talk. You know, alpha contracting, you get to go, yeah, but what I really wanted was this, whereas the typical FAR, I can't talk to you, put it in. If you didn't put the answer that I wanted to see in, I don't pick you. We've moved heavily onto OTAs. And that's me, fairness in lending, I'm a retired annuitant, so the other ones will be there longer. What other questions? I know we interacted as it went. And I apologize for the delay, but we're having challenge with it.
I have a question. It's about hearts and minds of, you know, congressional leaders and those that make the decisions at the top. Where, if you had to guess where their hearts and minds are right now towards this technology, are they where the warfighters were before of, we don't want to do it, we don't want everyone being monitored, or have they seen the output and the potential from it and started to move?
I'll give the initial, and Kristen, please jump in. So I equated, I'm old enough to remember the MRAP, right? So MRAP, Mine Protective Vehicle, Afghanistan, people being blown up, and Congress couldn't understand why the DoD was not moving fast enough to embrace what was already developed. And they forced the hand of DoD and really pushed it. I think we're sort of in that same place. They're seeing this, their staffers are meeting with us, and they're going, this has tremendous potential. You get a more fit force, you know what their status is, and you can protect them. DoD, this is huge, and they have been very supportive. We haven't taken hits. We've always had positive interactions with them. The risk to that is you don't give me a requirement, what they've written a check for, then they go, what the heck? We gave you the money for this phenomenal opportunity, so we need to perform, is Dan's piece. So, Kristen, I probably can say that. Kristen has to say it right.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Dan. And you know, that's something that we're you know, when we think about modernization of capability, not just in the wearable space, but in, you know, next gen sequencing on the bio side, advanced materials, like thinking about the PFAS replacements from, you know, soup materials, for example. Thinking about those modernization, we know technology is moving faster than our acquisition processes can keep up with. So when Congress supports us in being able to resource to support those modernization goals, we then have to figure out and play catch up on our acquisition processes. And what we're finding is that the requirements drafting process can be very slow. When there's a will, it can go faster. One of the things that we're very much working at an enterprise level is to be able to tie our requirements office, which was, I didn't hit on it, but it's the Joint Requirements Office for CBRND. So tying our requirements office with S&T, with the advanced developer, to be seen and knowledgeable of where the state of technology is, so that when we see these promising potential capabilities, the JRO can help bring in the service representatives that are actually the ones writing the requirements. The JRO is a facilitator, and so it's bringing all of those partners to the table at the right time to help streamline the requirements process. And so you heard Dan mentioning, we have been talking with AMC. We literally, OSD, the JPO,
Excuse me just a
JSTO.
minute. You guys can continue talking, but I do know some people have some lunch engagements, so I just wanted to let everybody know we're coming back here at 1400 to have the panel session. Thank you, Mr. McCormick, for improvising. I don't know if I could have done that. Very good, thank you. And please continue to have the conversation. I wanted to make sure that the people get to their next thing and do that. So I'll be back here at 1400. Now.
All right, thanks everybody. Hope everybody had a chance to get a break, get some lunch, recharge your batteries. First of all, my name is Jeff Bloom. I sit on the board of FCA Hawaii, kind of coordinated some of this stuff. Appreciate both Dr. Von Fonstock and Dave Restione for help coordinating on the Chem Bio side with everybody, and then also Ian Kitajima and also Armatus, who is our partners to be able to do this. So both Frank and Jeremy, so thanks very much for that. Before we begin, I wanted, again, at least some one-on-one meetings, depending how long we go. There's a room next door with tables set, and we'll have some, again, one-on-one. So the QR code is there if you want to, just go up and you can block who you want to talk to, and you get a time block and see what's available. So that's all there. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Von Fonstock from IndoPACOM J85, and he will take it from there.
Good afternoon. Thanks for participating, and those who participated this morning. We appreciate the good dialogue we had there. And also shout out to PICHTR for organizing the international outreach. And we at IndoPACOM want to work through our allies and partners to achieve, maintain the free and open Indo-Pacific. And from our perspective, the Chem Bio threat has an asymmetric risk to that, and it might not be something the day-to-day warfighter thinks about it, when they get up in the morning, but it's something that we do need to address and keep vigilance over, because as you saw what happened in COVID, you just had like all of a sudden we canceled all kinds of exercises and engagements and couldn't get into ports, and so how do we get ahead of that? So through awareness at steady state, during the competition phase, before we get into conflict, we can hopefully be better prepared, and if we can show better preparedness, better awareness within our own forces, and then extend that collaboration, interoperability, information sharing with our allies and partners, then we can hopefully maintain a better force posture and maneuver under bio-threat conditions. So to that end, we support the wearables initiative because it has dual functionality, as you saw, both for warfighter resilience on the physical side and also the cognitive side. And it can also do the early threat detection from the Chem Bio side. So that's kind of in a nutshell we covered this morning. And just wanted to reintroduce, for those who weren't here this morning, we have on my right Mr. Dave Restione, who represents the Chem Bio Defense Program as Senior Advisor. And we have Mr. Dan McCormick, who's leading the wearables effort as it rolled out from the pilot into looking towards getting into a sustained program. And then Dr. Genta from PICHTR, who helps underpin the development of algorithms and the different tech programs, and hopefully can, you saw this morning how they can build an iteration of capability, going from maybe the watch on the ring today to something completely different tomorrow. With that, I'd like to open it up for any questions from the audience from this morning before I'll pose a question. Okay, so nothing heard. I'll open it up. I'll say over to Dan. And we touched on this morning about authorities within our own enterprise in a DoD enterprise. Have you had any issues or seen anything on in working with allies and partners on their issues, or what's the difference between how they see wearables as compared to us, and how does that provide, offer any challenges that we need to overcome in collaboration to get information shared across a true combined JADC2 environment?
Yeah, I appreciate that area. During the pilot, we really didn't delve into it. I don't know, Dave, if during the early pilot work you went into it. There were conversations, as Mike, you know, with Australia and collaboration there. I think there's some differences in how they're looking at the medical piece. Casualty care being a focus, and I think there's a shift that I've been seeing with the U.S. side on that. But it was touched upon this morning in the medical paradigm. The use of technology is within the confines of the doctor's office, right? And stepping out in the medical community to the first responders with something that is as capable as a diagnostic or a wearable that's an indicator is a shift in the way they're thinking. And I think a couple of our partners have made that step, and I think the first responder community within the services is also doing it. Dave, if you wanted to talk Australia.
Yeah, just a little beyond Australia. We've had some very strong interest from the UK, so the Defense Science and Technology Laboratories. They actually participated in a couple of our tabletop exercises that we held in the beginning of the pilot program. We had extremely strong interest. I mean, I think we had a dozen operators or so, as well as scientists come out participating. Some really good ideas. They have a program out there, I can't think of the name of it right now, under Dr. Sarah Goodchild there at DSTL, that is a wearables-focused program. I'll think of it before the end of the session. But they have a strong interest in the wearables program. We were going to have a follow-on discussion with them about biosurveillance and wearables, and that's been kind of put on hold because of a transition of the biosurveillance program from one organization in the Pentagon to another. I know that's shocking. So now we're kind of in a holding pattern a little bit, waiting. When that happens, then we plan to be very aggressive in re-engaging our British and Australian counterparts going forward.
And in their approach, my brain is slow, so in those conversations with the operators from the UK, they were very much interested in wearables in total, but their use case was not infectious disease like our concern. Yeah, that'd be great, let's get that, but their 10-meter target was heat. They're a very small force. Whenever there's a heat injury, we have heat injuries, they have heat injuries. It's really pronounced to the point of going and defending each individual case in London. So they were very sensitive to getting at and solving the heat indicator.
Yeah, I think the other thing they brought up now that's coming to mind was there's a lot of discussion about U.S. and British units being embedded, so British brigade embedded into a U.S. division for future operations in Yukon, for example, or in the Pacific. And the question there was, if they have a set of wearable devices and we have wearable devices and we have our algorithms and they have theirs, how can we be sure that their algorithms are giving us the same information that ours are and vice versa? So when you have embedded units and the commander is looking across the force, so one of their points was, early on, we need to be able to be sharing results of algorithm development, making sure that we both believe each other's analysis, things like that, because eventually you're going to be fighting together. And so to be able to do that across the force was another point. Just one more addition to it, I know we talked about PICHTR this morning. The Japanese have a tremendous interest in this program. We've briefed folks from their MOD, from ATLA, on wearables. They have been interested from the very beginning. I went over there a year ago, and got a lot of interest from them on where this is going. In fact, I knew it because the colonel was wearing an Oura ring sitting right in front of me, and I had a discussion with him about it. But that's something that we're trying to explore now too, is what about Japanese industry, ideas from Japanese industry, and how does their MOD, looking at, yeah, and how does their MOD want to work with us in this area, because I know it's an area of interest for them. And the Koreans as well. The Koreans are investing in wearable technology as part of their NBC Dome project, which is something we're working with them on closely, additionally.
Algorithm side, Ed, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll just add that we're about to sign a PA or an agreement with Australia to work on some of the R&D efforts for wearable technologies with them. They're looking at some orthogonal kind of methodologies, looking at brainwave signatures and stuff, something that we haven't necessarily gone with. So that's how partners are working together, where they're looking at a unique space, unique signatures. We're looking at different signatures and how we can combine efforts to make it a total capability from our allies and partners.
And to close out on this question, I just want to point out to the audience that one of the issues in working with across countries is data rights, data property, PHI, public health information sharing, and risk liability is a big one. So if in Australia they look at wearables as a medical device, not a check engine light, so that carries a different level of risk for the first line leader, the platoon sergeant, the platoonier, to say, okay, if a soldier or airman, they have a alert going off on their watch and they're in the middle of going up a hill, and they say, oh, I gotta stop. And the platoon sergeant, keep going. And then that soldier falls down or faints or something, then what's the liability that platoon sergeant absorbs, that unit absorbs? So that is a big question that needs to be addressed on the Australian side, and I'm assuming would roll over to us at some point. So if in industry there are some solutions to address how to mitigate that risk on information awareness and risk to decision support, that would be an area I think Dan would entertain to hear about. Just put that out to the audience. Question?
Yeah, along those lines, have you looked at obfuscating, but yet maintaining a unique ID that can't be mapped back to the individual, but that gives that commander what he's looking for as far as, hey, this is a serious situation, without letting that data go across boundary board, across the main problem.
Very good point. So one of the things that we found out in a pilot exercise we did, or an experiment that we ran at the Lighting Academy, the Jungle Warfare School here at Schofield, is the warfighters, they loved the wearables, but then once they got into the operational mission versus the garrison environment or their fitness environment, they were more interested in not getting the data because it messed with their battle rhythm. So we were looking, our principal investigator from the Triple Army Medical Center, we looked at another technology which was not a watch or ring, but it was a medical grade ECG sensor, like a Band-Aid with electrodes on it, that they communicated the data, stored the data, and that went, just to your point, it went to the first line leader dashboard, but the user didn't have awareness, so they could track for medical resiliency or any other issues, but it didn't interfere with the mind of the cadet or the student going through the course. So that led us to think about how do we maybe address wearables from different settings, and I think the technical manager, Lauren Hankler, came back to us and said, hey, maybe we need to look at wearables with better direct feedback in a training or a garrison environment, but yet in an operational setting have something more like a lifelines patch that would provide excellent fidelity both from a health and a resiliency standpoint, fitness standpoint, but not give the warfighter immediate feedback, but have delayed feedback, but immediate feedback to your point, to the first line leader and medic.
So it's Goldilocks and the three bears, right? It's the just right solution. If you want to prevent a heat injury, you got to know the person. right? And so you can de-identify that, and then you can go analog and go look at all 10 of your guys, or you can go straight to the guy. Commanders are cleared for PHI, so that we can de-identify for the rest of the chain, and he can get a picture of his unit status, and then in consult with his medical staff who has access to that, reach in, and that's probably okay lag, right? Because it doesn't move that fast. You got 2 more days before the diagnostic kit is going to go off anyway. It's an indicator you can start looking. I think each one of those use cases has to be looked at. There are certainly ways to de-identify the data and to aggregate it. The battalion commander never needs to know the individual, right? I mean, it just, he's looking at his company level. What's their status? We don't have to be on the raid getting Osama, right? We don't need a live video feed from it. And it's that metric that we've got to put on each one of those kill chains, right?
In also doing our experimentation, switching gears to a second, more operational or tactical performance characteristic of wearables, one of the feedback that we got from the warfighter was, hey, we need longer battery life for the wearable devices. Right now, we're looking at between 12 and 24 hours for operational missions where they're out in the field for 3-4 days. That's not long enough, so what can we do in industry to help support JPO enhancing battery life, or just maybe it's not a battery, maybe it's a it just self-powers to motion or something. So that's another area that I think could be useful. And I didn't know if Ed, if in your research, are you guys studying any of that, or is that a different group?
So we're not necessarily funding any device enhancements in that way, but I do know companies that are funded by DoD that are looking at taking it like a Garmin watch and extending it to a 60-day life period. They're actively working on that. So yeah, I think it is a big issue, but I do think commercial technologies are advancing in that space already too, so I think we'll take that opportunity in a bit. With respect to that CDS question, though, I do think that still is a challenge for us that we can't push the data through the CDS as fast enough. So we need to get to what Mr. McCormick brought up is these algorithms running on the edge or running on the sensors and only pushing some of the smaller sets of data through the CDSs, or hand selecting which of the full data set you want for the interested party, through the CDS and trying to push the entire command or the entire structure through the CDS because it just can't keep up. Technology doesn't exist. So it's a challenge.
Mapping out the timeline of that data is a big piece of that, right? So you go back to COVID and we wanted to know for the individual, 2 days from now, you're going to be sick. And the local reaction to that is X. Early in COVID, if we had rate and it was showing something's going on, but we don't know what it is yet, we didn't happen to have the genome sequence. Now we're interested in every bit of that data to start to look at the case management of it, right? What's the incubation period? What's the R0? What are the signs, the trends that are coming out of it? And you need the complete data set out of it. So you go out to the forward edge where you have denied comms, and they're your pool of people that are filling out that data set. They are being fed and resupplied with bullets on a regular basis. We have to look at data that way too. Is the lag of 3 days for a complete data set really change the research, or can even process that much data, and does it matter? If I get it 3 days from now, I've lost 3 days, but I didn't lose the 6 months of COVID to get to the answer. The first 6 months was figuring out a lot of stuff, right? If you have that robust data set and it lags for 3 days, is that a big deal for the next one? Could be. Huge R0, huge killer bug. You don't even want to waste 3 days, but it's a lot better than 6 months.
So to that end, this being a Navy-centric command, there's a lot of water in the PACOM theater. Navy ships spend a lot of time afloat. Data management from ship to a land node can be a challenge. So the whole data management on a maritime environment might be different than a land-based force. So the Navy's looking at how do they manage their wearables information at the local level to address readiness versus pushing up periodic updates to the command. So it comes down to a matter of tactics, procedures, techniques, as well as the technology itself. And then you have, of course, situations where your ship goes dark, it doesn't transmit anything because it's on a mission. So, how do you store the data but yet maintain like a Bluetooth environment, a localized network? And similarly, when you're on a mission, a special forces mission or a tactical mission where you're needing to be silent with respect to electromagnetic spectrum, those wearable devices, you still want to, how can they still perform and provide information without radiating and giving away position? Because as we know, if you radiate, you can be shot.
So, being part of an experiment, I'm now wearing a Garmin, but I was wearing an Oura ring, and I could put the Oura ring in airplane mode, and I know Whoop is skiff acceptable by the port. I imagine you could put a little pressure on some of these commercial vendors who want to see their devices used in this capacity. They just need to know with enough notice that these are the issues you guys are looking for. So,
And on the DoD side, we can't let procurement by different parts of DoD not leverage those opportunities, right? So if I drop a $96 million contract for people that are just going to the gym that don't have any of those considerations, but we have those, that's the collaboration piece that we have to work out, right? Because that's our moment with industry, that particular vendor, to go, hey, while we're doing this, we also want to do this little bit, which isn't as big for your commercial market.
and unfortunately, as well, I'm just imagining that a commercial person, for that device, had a quota retired. So, he wasn't necessarily, going to be thinking about anything other than I want to sell as many devices as I can.
Yeah, when you're dealing with a vendor that has a Gucci ring model, right? You don't have as much leverage. They've already gotten it. They've already made it.
How do you think about wearables versus embeddables, and what changes or doesn't change in the space?
Meaning like something that's embedded under the skin?
Or partially, yeah.
Partially. So in our capability needs statement that PACOM put out, we actually included those as part of the wearable scope.
From observational limited data set, but we've been in an awful lot of places in the last couple of years talking wearables. And I saw a change. My perspective is there's a change in acceptance. When I first came, and Dave was briefing me on, because I retired and disappeared for a little while, and Dave's briefing me, he's saying, yeah, using CGM technology is a no-go. Everybody's saying no way. Right now, we're actively working with people that are dying to have it, which is the acceptance piece. So GISTO has an effort right now looking for nerve agent and opioids, not glucose, but lactate, choline, O2, out of a CGM type model. And the user community, there's a price for CGMs, which we all know, but there are use cases where that price doesn't matter. And then as the price drops, you're watching Dexcom just announced CGMs for the masses, right? Just a couple months ago, and they're dropping price for a part of the market. We're going to see that continue to go down. From my perspective, and smack me because I'm not technical like you, but that's going to be a step function better capability than correlation of signals to some event. You can see an awful lot of stuff that is the stuff when you're looking at interstitial fluids.
I'd like to add also that when you get into the interstitial, like monitoring blood markers and different actual metabolic pieces of information from the body directly versus derivatively, you could look at more of a first principles model algorithm versus a derivative AI-based model. So you can get a more, I think, more individualized based performance response for that wearable to then affect tailored feedback for the user, for the wearer. So I think we could really grow in that regard. Whereas right now we're looking at pure AI data sets that have a lot of variability and baseline changes and that aren't accounted for. For example, the melanin in the skin versus one group from another has the same green laser that gives you a different response. Is that accounted for by individual or by groups? So if you get to specific embedded drawing blood, for example, through the microneedle, I think you can get more tailored first, based on first principles versus just a raw AI-based algorithm. And then, of course, it's not just you could then use machine learning and AI to then enhance that. But I think getting at a more tailorable situation gets us at the next level, I would say.
I guess if I could just jump in there and add a little bit that we did do a lot of effort on personalization of our baselining capability. So all the algorithm performance curves that you saw for the rate effort is all personalized. So it's individualized to that individual. So it starts to understand and learn their feature sets and adapts to them. So those changes that might be due to skin color and the other factors, gender, we have to do some corrections on the gender side for the cycling of the female gender. But it's been personalized now, so we can try to uncover and remove that risk and that bias risk.
I appreciate that.
So I'd also, it's a great area that you brought up of interest. It's also, when we're sitting here, we're looking at the chem bio problem, right? Well, we're interested in the bigger problem because the thing that makes this affordable is its multi-use, right? So when we looked at organophosphate poisoning, nerve agent, or opioid, that's great. We didn't need glucose for that. Glucose wasn't the thing of interest. But it is certainly of interest to the guy that is trying to recruit a base of warfighters and having to accept some future warfighters that are not within weight tolerance, and you want to correct that. Glucose is huge. If you can teach them how to eat and see real time how their body is processing it, and you've got two ways to monitor them, right? And really get to the reaction of that individual and more quickly get them there. Doesn't help me for my chem bio mission other than we'll have a warfighter to fight in that environment. But it makes our efforts cost effective. So if you're in that space, we want to hear the other things because we're tied to the community, and we'll go over to the others and say, hey, this is a dual use. Let's talk about this together.
So that makes me think about how industry could help build like we had before, instead of wearing 3 watches, you can use 1 watch or 1 wearable platform to integrate multiple purposes, and then can bio interested measurements of 1 layer or 2 layers in that, but yet you have one you might need for the shot or for accelerometry or different measurements. Heat, of course, you mentioned. But so can industry help build a platform that can be where the different sensor modalities can be layered in and integrated into a common system that's worn and then manage the data so that we don't have a battery issue with multiple different types of batteries and different wearable devices to wear, and it can just be a more cohesive system. I think that's something that Ed might
Yeah, I think what industry could do for us is making sure their architectures are open and accessible and getting their data out onto their APIs or their SDK packages. A lot of, all the vendors have some form of lock on some of their data. Some of their data is exposed, but some other endpoints aren't. Some are cloud-based and some are watch-based. Some, you know, so the more open that we can make to the raw data that's on the system, whether it's the G-force measurements and accelerometer data, the raw PPG waveforms, stuff like that, you can exploit that data for our needs, but you really need an industry partner to think in that perspective and be open to, you know, let them serve the data and let others build off of it instead of trying to do it all. You know, that would be an advancement in technology to do for us to allow us to get to a single form factor fit for 100 purposes instead of a single or a couple purposes.
Maybe related to that, has there really been talk about, this is very common on the software side, but open sourcing different elements so that you could kind of speed up innovation, have others from industry, small businesses, larger businesses work together to develop a more common platform that would enable some of this to happen? Has there been discussions about that, or is that just problematic because of the nature of the data that's being collected?
I guess from the device wearable perspective, we're not controlling that market space. And we're not in a position to control that market space because there's such an industrial strong foothold there. So we can only hope to influence this through buying power potentially. For some of the other packages though, I do think there's opportunities to leverage open source and be collaborative in that space, share some of the data that we can that's not controlled by classified information. But you know, I think there are opportunities there on the algorithm side or software development, sustainment. You know, I think there's some interesting spaces in there that would be very powerful in open source. DoD is facing challenges with every day a new vulnerability on a new software package that was cleaned yesterday. So how do we sustain that without having to we can't keep all of our partners on contract forever to update their code. So, you know, are there open source tools or how can we build an open source framework that can help sustainability of our agent software codes to keep them vulnerable free and patched? I don't know, that was a tangent of an answer, but I don't know if anyone else is.
Just in support, I agree with that. There are some efforts. HHS, ARPA-H, has a solicitation out, and they're looking at them right now. And their desire for physiological monitoring is to go to underserved communities, right? So they got to bring the price point down. So they're looking for the very inexpensive. The $800 Garmin watch is not an acceptable solution for what they're trying to do. So we're monitoring them. They've gone out and are trying to get that. As long as the sensitivity, selectivity is good, we can bring it in. So we need to set how we look at that. So when you look at how CGMs came to market, right? Really, the base level, they went to the FDA and they said, this is the gold standard of glucose monitoring, not the pick of the finger, but this. This is what you get with a finger prick, and we can get right in here with continuous monitoring. And that's what they proved, right? And so we have to look at our selection, and Ed talked about AFRL, we'll do a quick look. As long as you're in the band, you can drive the algorithm, we're happy. Right now, we're using some pretty mature, expensive technology to do it. We're not hemmed into that. But if the Army is buying Garmin watches for all their force for those two other units, we're going to keep it in the set, right? Because Chem Bio Defense Program isn't going to equip all the watches. A lot of people will turn to us and go, oh, you should do this, bring your own device, which is interesting, but bring your own device is really bring your own approved device, right? And it's partitioned. And on the partition side, doesn't include Bluetooth. This needs to talk. So if it needs to talk to send the data, how do you bring your own device and do that? So do you equip them for garrison and take the cyber risk because, well, they're giving it up with their personal phone anyway, and we're seeing it, and when we go to war, we switch it out and we move the data. their baseline over onto the secure side and move forward. We're looking at those, but bring your own device is not a clean, easy. It sounds really good. It sells big in the building. But if somebody's got ideas on that, we're all in to listen to.
So I was going to follow up on that and flip it back to the requirements end of things to help, manage the device integration into the wearables campaign of technology evolving technology into a functioning system that we can transition to the warfighter and sustain. So when we developed, again, the capability needs statement that was inherently software-based, our thinking was that if we could design a rugged software backbone that can then incorporate devices over time, that would be more enduring than trying to base it on devices we have today, because the devices are going to evolve rapidly in industry, and we're not going to be able to keep pace in the DoD to keep updating our requirements. So we wanted to write a requirement that was nearly software-based. Say, okay, develop a software system architecture that is adaptive and spirals over time, that technology as it evolves from purely like laser-based to injectable or whatever, so that we don't have to then go back to the requirements well and say, well, we can stop everything because our requirements are outdated. So from that perspective, I think industry could also add, looking at that software-based platform system that could be designed to allow flexible adaptation of devices and new technology as it comes to fruition.
On that front, are there common data standards for this type of data that are available to be leveraged for companies to build on, or is that something that you're looking for, or how's that work?
We have some investments in that space to harmonize all the data to make for data algorithm pipeline development more easier. That's a bad English language. Easier, but there is not a standard established, like an ISO standard or anything like that. And I think that would be interesting to do in this space. So no, not yet.
Do you have as a follow-on, do you have your own taxonomy or ontology that you use in the meantime, or?
We do. So we have as part of the Agent Rapids platform, we have a data dictionary and a data definition library that people have to read to as we bring in new data sets. We're also trying to establish that lexicon within our contract vehicles. So when contractors come on, we say this is the data standard you have to match as you deliver data to us, so that we don't have to go through this harmonization process like we're doing with all this contractor formatted data.
Is that something that can be published, or is that, like, can you publish that standard, or that standard?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I think it might be something that we publish. I'll take a note to see when we finalize it, how we can get that out. That's a good point, thanks.
On the requirements note, I was thinking about what you were talking about earlier with that being a pain point, needing buy-in and all that sort of thing. Coming from industry that feels difficult, may not have access to, how do you have any suggestions or thoughts on how that is possible, especially at the speed of how innovation is moving things? We were having an interesting conversation before lunch about that, and I'm just curious on thoughts on how that feels far away from me in industry, and like how that can happen if we have suggestions or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to do a better job selling the capability. So if you can help us with your expertise in marketing, sometimes we fail at a marketing perspective of getting the message out correctly and convincing the decision makers or the services, whoever you want to call it, the services writing requirements, the people, but how do you communicate the capability or the concept of the capability? This is the return on investment if they make the investment in this, and this is what you'll get if you can write the requirement broad enough that you don't have to, I think Mike, you were saying it, you don't have to reevaluate or redevelop that requirement again in the future. So, that's where maybe some industry partner and skills come in, because you're doing that daily, right? You're marketing yourself, you're trying to, get out, whether venture capitalism or, just selling your product line. So if you have unique ideas of, hey, this is a cool tech, and if you spun the conversation in this way, it might attract more or get better traction with the audience you're presenting at. Maybe that's an idea, but I'll open it up for others to add on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, because one of the things that we've noticed, and Dan, you can correct me, but most of the, I would say, more junior, younger operators were really excited about the wearables technology. This is great. We're going to wear these things, we're going to learn how this works. It's a new thing, they can see the value. But as you go up the chain in the DoD or in the military, and I don't know whether, I don't want to say it's an age thing, it could be a worried about decision thing, more responsibility as you go from a second lieutenant to a colonel. They're more worried about their job, or they're more worried about the politics, but that's definitely an issue, because we got to a point where we had majors and below, very engaged, very interested. And then you got up higher, and it was sort of like, oh, what's this wearable stuff? Really? And then all the policy questions and all the issues come back, which is another issue, I think, is understanding the legal implications of using devices like this and pulling Sergeant Snuffy off the line because his or her numbers were low for that day, and then that turns out to be a hugely successful mission, and everybody else gets a medal, and Sergeant Snuffy doesn't, right? And then that hurts his or her career. And so all these people keep going down these lines of everybody's afraid of the new technology because of all these different implications. But what we see in the younger crowd is definitely, in the more junior crowd, a lot of excitement. So how do we market this to the point where we can get the more senior folks who, in the end, make a lot of these decisions, right? To support requirements.
Well, say that in the PICHTR we had some good senior leader buy-in to help that, and then I think by engaging with those that do get it and bringing them in and having them actually wear devices and providing that feedback, and maybe continuing another senior leader readiness experiment or whatever, we can maybe broaden that acceptance. Back to the requirements thing, I don't know if we shared with you back on marketing, how has a requirement become validated, right? So I could sit there and I was like, oh, we need, this and that and the other and all these things. Well, then we got to write that up, and we got to take it, we got to defend that requirement in front of a functional control board. There's one for protection, there's one for logistics, there's one for health. So how do we defend that? So we have to go before the services representation, the service representatives at the functional control board that can control the decision on what to fund and how to plan the funding. And a lot of times their first answer is no, because they already have a backlog of things they got to fund, they have priorities, a shortage of money, the existing programs are already on their way, they don't want new stuff injected in their existing programs because that drives more risk to them. So how do we come up with a new requirement that gets them to say yes? Usually what happens is if you have a broad, well thought out requirement, they go, whoa, that's too broad. Bring it in. So then by the time you're done, it's something that's very narrow, and then it's like, okay, that didn't get at the requirements. And then do I have like 6 more requirements to get to the broad one just because it's getting digestible bites? So there's a battle there that we have to fight at our end to get acceptance by the service representatives. So again, it comes to like how to find that balance of something that's a manageable requirement that they can afford, that they can understand, and that they can be acted upon in a reasonable time and get transitioned. So we can come up with a beautiful platform requirement that is very holistic, but it will not be accepted because it's too broad. So I just want to give you that context of how does a requirement become validated, because I take a look at requirements, but they have to go through a validation process. And even once they're validated, someone has to take the action to say, yeah, we're going to put money against that in our 5-year plan. We the Navy are going to take you know, fight for $20 million or whatever to put it against development. And if the developer, either on the early development side, like the Defense Production Agency, or the advanced developer, or the JPO Cabal Defense, they have a valid requirement, but they don't have money to do it, then it just goes, oh, great, well, when that gets funded, we'll act on it, because we have 18 other things that are funded we gotta do. So there's a constant battle of bringing new technology in, or even non-material solutions that might impose risk to existing programs, or cost risk to budgets and shuffle priorities. But then, you know, we at the Combatant Command, we can push advocacy for a requirement, and urgent need requests do matter, so we have to choose our bullets, you know, when do we want to really exert that pressure, that top level pressure, and expend that leadership capital to get at something. And a lot of times, things like hypersonic weapons take priority over the watch. So those are the things we have to battle internally on. How do we get our commander to sign off on something?
So that marketing challenge is huge for us. So as a PM guy, you're very busy on your cost schedule, performance, and a very narrow look. Some of us have roles that are wider, but you're really focused on that. And so when you do a general requirement that covers the waterfront, as it should, and they ask you to narrow it, when you go in with your cost estimate and your return on investment predictions, it's only for that one wedge. And for something like this that is cross-cutting, yes, I'm going to go after organophosphate nerve agent, and it's going to cost me $1,000 a unit. Well, that's too expensive. Yeah, but it also can enable contact tracing and take that from a system that does not work and actually automate it and have a system that could be reactive to an epidemic, and that would have a return on investment. Yeah, but that's not your requirement. And it can also help you with the fitness of your unit. Yeah, but that's not your requirement. You can't show that as your ROI.
Yeah.
So it isn't the direct table of ROI, but it's part of the story we have to tell. And so anybody that's good at telling those stories, as we're working with you, help us tell the story. There's no pride in it, right? People call me a salesman every once in a while, but I'm not good at it. I'm not hired by companies to do it. I know there's a lot more talent out there to do it, so that is an area that we're always looking for. Never assume we're going to sell your product well. Help us sell the goodness for the warfighter.
That's a good point, Dan. It really illustrates kind of sometimes a catch-22 again with requirement shaping and rushing one to get approved versus battling it out to get a broader one approved, and then later on they come back and they nail you on that ROI proposition. Very true. But maybe what I'd like to do at this point is, as we finish up this portion of the wearables workshop, is that the urgency of getting technology transition is higher today than it was 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and the importance of collaboration between the services, between the labs and the requirement generators of the services and us as Innovate on the user side is becoming more necessary. So we're looking at how do we change the culture from the serial acquisition process to a more agile, parallel process. And to that end, we're really driving with the Chemical Defense Program to affect that change by collaborating on a more operational implementation side, getting earlier user engagement, getting user feedback in an official document that we can then drive to the services and say, hey, this stuff does work. This is what the warfighter is saying. This is how it performed in the field, and then get them higher confidence that it's worth spending their money. So we're working together as an enterprise to drive that faster, and industry needs to be at the table to help that out. So we're looking at finding ways to improve the collaboration with industry as we move towards this more parallel acquisition development process versus the traditional 5001 series.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned the OTAs this morning, where you can go from S&T right through to production. So instead of our old model where we had to invest in science and technology, prove it out to a certain level, and then we had to recompete the contracts once it moved from S&T to acquisition. It's ridiculous. Now with OTAs, we can do this. We can pick a performer and go straight through to production. It's a huge advantage in speed of transition to get into the warfighter.
During COVID, we got a demand signal. 2 weeks later, we had a $650 million contract out the door. And it was to develop, establish production, and put PCR into the size of the transponder. And you can look it up, QCUE. And so during COVID, I didn't have to go and take a test because I had that contract and I had a prototype. Right? So I could get a PCR result on my desk, and it took a total of 3 weeks to put that together. The agility is there. We just have to exercise it, and we're ready to do it in this space.
I think MTech was also an OTA that was mentioned earlier today.
Yes.
I'm familiar with something that went out earlier in the year related to Army recruiting. So pre-boot camp. So if you can establish a baseline on those who are en route to boot camp and have them with the wearables, you're going to be able to establish that baseline earlier, and so that as they go through boot camp, that's a value add, and then as they exit boot camp, you now have even more data, including seeing the stress of boot camp and all the other aspects of that. Anyway, the one MTech project that I'm familiar with was awarded but not funded because apparently the bucket of money associated with that particular effort had dried up or had been allocated to other higher priority things. So anyway, I'm just throwing it out there that, like I know you're focused on the Chem Bio thing, but again, if you can rally the troops in other areas.
So I think there's room for a lot of good ideas. So you've identified somebody that's going to come and join the force, and that's, I couldn't be prouder of that individual. What's that individual going to do with their first paycheck? They're going to buy a new iPhone, they're going to buy a new watch, and 12 months in, they're going to buy a new car. So if I want to hook him and get a baseline and make an affordable system for the DoD, how about having the recruiter with a voucher that says, you're recruited, you've signed the contract, you got instant financing for your phone, which is already partitioned, and your wearable that is already connected to it, and you maintain that discount if you do these steps. And if you don't, then the company will come and repossess the phone and the watch, like they could if you were on payments. There's room for that. So if people have those kind of ideas, I think the DoD needs to start thinking like that, because that becomes affordable at that point.
Sure.
Because they're going to buy a watch and they're going to buy a phone.
Yeah, it's the carrot.
Yeah.
I guess just to talk a little bit, and I didn't talk about it in the talk, but the baselining information needs, we've done a lot of work on that area, so we've gotten it down to a single 5-hour period of sleep is enough to get your baseline for those rate algorithms. We perform it at 0.799, 795, and it goes up, the first 12 days. That kind of asymptotes out at its full peak performance, but we did a lot of work in trying to removing that requirement to get a long baseline for performance. But it's a great idea. I just wanted to make sure that information was out there.
I have a question. We're kind of the new kids on the block, but so forgive my ignorance here. What is the crossover with procurement leveraging Defense Innovation Unit, SoftWorks, or other entities like that? Is it sometimes when opportunities arise, or is that a route that's not generally used for this?
We do leverage those outreach programs, like especially DIU is involved a lot, and we do work with SoftWorks. I think SOCOM uses them, it has used them for wearables already. So those are two good examples. And then we also have the 5 on-ramp hubs that Ensign on the EAU is rolled out, and there's one in Hawaii, and there's one in Kansas, Phoenix, Washington State, in New York, in Ohio, in the 60s. Anyway, so that's those are great examples of how to do outreach and get small business to support our efforts in wearables, and we will continue to leverage those and SBIR topics as well.
So I don't know if part of the question was source of funds and probability of going, right, to production. So on the good side, the mechanism is there, right? So the efforts we do with DIU, we're looking at one right now for biosurveillance, the overarching biosurveillance system. And they're doing some prototyping of that. In that OTA, they put the language to one, continue the development, and there's tasks that are not in the first tranche of it, so that's open, but it also has the procurement hook. So as the DASD is doing the priorities, and the department has said that's a priority, and we've got in the palm this much production out there, it's the mechanism is there for that production to land on. The probability of it getting through is how good is the first stage, the second stage, and the third stage of it, right? I mean, it has to work to get there.
I think one other thing we're looking at, when you start to talk about, we talked about wastewater and other applications this morning, how do we bring all that accrual of information together to give a picture, right? So you're looking at wastewater samples, whether they be from aircraft, bases, wherever you're looking. Then you have physiological indicators from different locations. So you're starting to see accrual of bits of information over time, start to give you a picture that there's something anomalous going on, right? How do I put all that together into a decision space to allow that commander to say, I think there's something going on here, right? And then, so that's that bigger picture as well from the IEW perspective that we're really looking at hard. You know, when do I know to start collecting more data? And how much data do I need to collect and then make a decision? So that's all out there too, is an opportunity space. And that's going to be big in the biosurveillance area that's coming on.
And I guess too, along those lines, Dave, if I could add, you know, even thinking bigger than that is, now that you understand that there's a problem, what's the forecast look like, right? And what countermeasures can you do to reduce that impact on the forest? So how can you use modeling and simulation tools to, now you have you identified something, this is what it's projected forward in a couple weeks or a couple months time frame. If we did this medical countermeasure, we enrolled this diagnostic out, or if we could do something in 60 days and get it out, you know, how does that impact the mission readiness and welfare, you know, a month, a year down the line, right? So all that kind of big thinking as well.
Yeah, and that's an area, again, getting back to the international, you know, we have an active program right now with Australia, with the DMTC and the DST group, looking at a biosurveillance decision support system, which is looking at something like that. It's the very beginning of it, and then they're also looking about how, if I had wearables, how would I use that data in addition to the data that they're collecting.
So can the wearable data in near real time update the modeling?
Yes.
With actual data to then make it more refined, more on point versus just projected data?
So I think part of the challenge is the industry partners have to have a view of the total system. And that's why, you know, Dr. O'Connor started it with, we've got layers, right? Integrated early warning. And how you interact with that. It doesn't mean you have to be a sensor expert if you're over in the protection space, but you need to understand the interaction. If you're in the wastewater space, you certainly want to understand the diagnostic space and the wearable space and how they interact, because that's how you really get to the answer that matters. And so you can help us when you say, you need to do this. When I'm saying there's something here, you want to, critical pieces of information is who could have created that in that pool, which then goes into those users, who's got a wearable on, and goes to their medical record and says that these people are showing up, and there's 3 sources of information that points back to that, right? the wearables piece and the medical piece will help you do the case management that starts to, on a novel challenge, starts to piece together what that timeline is of it. This is when they were bit, this is the incubation period, this is the asymptomatic spread, this is the symptomatic spread, what is the R naught in the two of them. All those pieces have to come together. You have to understand that the wastewater isn't just it, right? Wastewater is not going to answer it all. It's going to give a really important piece. Wearables isn't going to answer it all. It's going to give a piece. The environmental sensor isn't going to do it all. The medical record isn't going to do it all.
Great, and speaking of timelines, I think we have passed the hour, so really appreciate the discussion, good input from the audience, and we hope that you also took away some knowledge gained from this panel to help you maybe support our efforts going forward. And I think Dave, is your closing remark on what to look out for if there's a follow-on or an R5? Anything coming out after this or not?
Well, we've got the event that was mentioned this morning. We're talking about the event in February where we're going to have industry come back. We'll give you some simulated data, some data and information, and see how we can do on that. That's one thing that's coming up. I think the other folks over here mentioned that there's some opportunities to reach out to both PICHTR and the JPEO for open BAAs, as well as looking for solicitations. But I'll be really honest, if you have a good idea, you really just need to get us, call us up. You can do it through JET, you can call us on the phone, you can send us an email, you can put up a smoke signal, whatever it is, just don't hesitate to reach out to us and tell us what you're thinking about. We are all ears in this space.
Yes, I guess if I could add to that,
Yeah,
PICHTR has, every week we have an invited guest speaker for the Chemical Defense for a technology launch. So if you have a technology that you want to brief, it's open to all of our agency to join in. We know we probably have between 20 to 100 people depending on the topic, but if you have an idea, certainly reach out to me and I can get you in contact with the manager of that effort. And I think we're booked through March of next year, but we'll get you on the roster for next year if you have something that you want to pitch for the Tech Talk.